Good evening, and welcome. There is nothing you need to do now, nothing at all, except to be here and to let yourself grow slowly heavier and to listen. You have come to the end of the day, and the day is finished with you now, and it asks nothing more. So let us begin, as we always begin, by letting the body come down out of its long day of holding, one small piece at a time. Let your shoulders come down. Let them come down away from your ears, down and back, and then, when you think they have come as far as they can, let them come down a little further than that, a little further still, until you feel the small unclenching that you did not even know you were waiting to do. Let the jaw loosen. So many of us hold the day in the jaw, the teeth just barely touching, the muscles of the face still faintly braced against nothing at all. So let the jaw come unhooked. Let the tongue rest soft in the floor of the mouth. Let the space between the brows go smooth and wide. Let the breath lengthen. Not forced, not deepened on purpose, only allowed to slow, allowed to grow long and even and unhurried. The out breath a little longer than the in. The way the tide goes out a little longer than it comes in. And feel, underneath you, the bed taking your weight. It has been taking your weight this whole time, patiently, and now you can give it to the bed entirely, the weight of your legs, the weight of your hips and your back, the weight of your arms and your hands, the weight of your head. All of it handed over to the mattress beneath you, so that you have nothing at all to carry. You are held. You may sink. And while the body settles, let the mind go travelling, gently, the way the mind likes to wander at the edge of sleep, not far and not fast, but out and away from this warm, dark room, out across the sleeping country, to a shore on the far eastern edge of England, where tonight our story quietly waits. Come with me then in the drowsy imagination to the county of Suffolk, in the old land of East Anglia, that soft, low, gentle bulge of England that leans out into the cold grey water of the North Sea. It is a country of wide skies and small fields, of reed beds and slow rivers, of sandy heaths where the gorse grows, and of a coastline made not of hard stone, but of sand and shingle and crumbling earth. So that the land here and the sea here have always been on speaking terms, always trading a little back and forth. And along that coast, if you follow it down past the little towns, past the harbours and the marshes and the wandering paths through the heather, you come at last to a very small and very quiet place. It is called Dunwich. Say it softly to yourself, Dunwich, and let it be the last bright coin you turn over in your hand before the light goes out. You arrive in the mind on a grey and gentle afternoon. There is not much here. A narrow lane comes down through the trees and the heath to meet the sea. There is a scattering of houses, a handful of them, no more, and a small inn, and a little way inland a plain church of flint. There is a beach of pale shingle, where the fishing boats are drawn up above the tide line, and beyond the shingle the wide grey water goes out and out to a soft, uncertain horizon where the sea and the sky are almost the same colour. Above the beach the land rises only a little, into a low cliff of sandy earth, and even as you stand and look at it you can see how soft that cliff is, how it slumps and crumbles at its edge, how the grass at the top leans out over nothing, and how, here and there, a little more of it has lately come away and slid down onto the sand below. The wind comes in off the water, mild and salt and steady. A few gulls turn in the air. Somewhere a curlew calls its long falling call across the marsh. It is a place at the very edge of things, peaceful, half forgotten, a tiny hamlet where a few dozen souls live quietly with their backs to the land and their faces to the sea. You could walk from one end of it to the other in a handful of minutes, and think, as you walked, that nothing of any great importance had ever happened here at all. Behind the little settlement, the land climbs softly away into the Suffolk countryside, into the heath they call the Sandlings, a wide gentle country of sandy soil and purple heather and low-twisted gorse, where the paths run pale and quiet through the bracken, and the wind moves the grasses in long, slow waves. Down the coast away lie the reed beds and the marshes, where the birds come in their thousands, and inland, in a stand of trees, stand the grey broken walls of an old friary, roofless and patient, the ivy softening its stones. If you did not know the story, you would take this for what it seems, a small, mild, out-of-the-way corner of England. The kind of quiet place where a person might come to walk a dog along the shingle, or sit outside the little inn of a summer evening, or simply stand and watch the grey water and think of nothing much at all. A backwater. A soft green ending of the road. That is all it looks to be. And that is where the strangeness begins. Because it is not true. This small, still, near-empty village on its crumbling cliff was once. And here is the wonder of it, the thing that seems almost impossible to believe as you stand on the quiet shingle, one of the greatest and richest cities in all of medieval England. Not a village, not a large village, nor even a busy little market town. A city. A great walled port, one of the finest harbours on the whole eastern coast, crowded with ships and merchants and mariners, ringing from end to end with the bells of church after church after church, a proud and self-governing town that held charters from its kings, that sent its own men to sit in Parliament, that carried its wealth in silver herring hauled cold and shining out of these very waters, where you now see only grey sea and a low soft cliff, and a scatter of cottages. There once stood streets and market-places, quays and gates, timber houses crowded close together, friaries and hospitals, and a whole crowded skyline of towers and spires standing up against this same sky. A city stood here. And it is gone. That is the heart of it, and I am going to tell you the ending now, plainly and early, the way we always do here, because there are to be no shocks in this telling, nothing waiting in the dark to startle you, nothing sprung upon you at the last. So here is how it comes out, and here is the whole shape of it, given to you at the very beginning, so that you may hold it safely in your hand the whole night through. The great city of Dunwich was taken by the sea. It was taken slowly, very, very slowly, over the better part of 700 years, some 7 long centuries, street by street and house by house and church by church. The soft cliff crumbling and the grey water creeping in, until almost the whole of that vast and wealthy town had slipped away beneath the waves, and only this small, quiet hamlet was left standing at the top of the last of the cliff. That is where the city went. It is under the water now, out there, off this beach, beneath that soft, uncertain horizon. And it has been so for a long time. Now hold on to this, for it is the gentlest part, and it is the part I most want you to carry down into sleep. When you hear that a whole city was taken by the sea, the heart tightens for a moment. It expects a horror, a great catastrophe, a night of terror and drowning and cruelty. But that is not this story. This is not a tale of a villain. There is no wicked man in it, no burning, no soldiers, no doors broken in, no families turned out weeping onto the road. Nobody did this to Dunwich. It was only the sea, the old, patient, blameless sea, doing slowly and without any malice at all the thing that the sea has always done, which is to take a little of the land, and give a little back, and take a little more, over years and lifetimes and long slow centuries, so unhurriedly that a person might live and die on that cliff, and see only a small change in it, and their grandchildren only a small change more. It was a gentle taking. It was a natural end, the long, slow, wistful, blameless end of a place, the way an autumn comes gently to a great tree, the way an evening comes gently to a long day. And because it was gentle, and because it was slow, and because it was nobody's cruelty, it is a peculiarly restful thing to hold in the mind as you fall asleep. There is nothing here to be angry about. There is nothing here to be frightened of. It is all long, long over. And the city was not truly lost, either, not in the way that matters most. That is the other half of the ending, and I give it to you now too. The great town of Dunwich is gone from the cliff, yes, but it is not gone from memory. It is remembered. Its story has been kept and written down and told again, through all the centuries since. Its ruins that remain are tended and cared for. The little museum in the surviving village keeps its whole long history lovingly, room by room and in our own time, and this is a wonder we shall come to at the very end. On the last of our nights, clever people with clever instruments have gone out in boats over the drowned streets and mapped the whole sunken city on the floor of the sea, tracing where the roads ran and where the great churches stood, so that Dunwich has been found again and known again and honoured again. They have a name for it now, a kind of loving name. They call it Britain's Atlantis. So you see, the ending is a kind one, all the way down. The city was taken gently, and it is remembered still. Do you feel how safe that makes the night? You already know how the story comes out. There is no suspense in it for you now. Nothing you must stay awake to discover, no turn of the tale that will jolt you from your rest. You may drift off at any moment you please and lose nothing, because the whole shape of it is already yours. If your eyes should close before I have finished, well, then you will simply have gone on ahead into the very peace this story is trying to give you, and that is exactly right and exactly welcome. But the empty shore does ask a question. Stand there a moment longer, in the mind, on the pale shingle, with the mild wind on your face and the grey water going quietly in and out. Look up at that low crumbling cliff with its handful of houses and its one small church, and let the shore ask you the thing it has been asking for hundreds of years. Where did it all go? Where are the streets and the marketplace and the busy quays crowded with ships from Flanders and France? Where are the merchants counting their wool and their wine, the fishermen mending their nets, the friars in their grey and black robes walking down to preach in the town? Where are the towers and the many, many bells, a whole great city, thousands of lives, generations of them, a place proud and certain of itself and sure that it would stand forever, and now only this, a lane, a beach, a few cottages, the wind and the sea? Where did the whole city go? We are going to answer that question. We are going to answer it slowly and softly, over these coming nights, taking all the time in the world, because we are in no hurry at all, and neither, any longer, is Dunwich. We shall turn time gently backward and rebuild the great city whole again in the mind, until you can walk its streets and hear its bells and love it as the people who lived there loved it. And then, having come to love it, we shall stand with it and watch the patient sea take it quietly back, storm by storm, church by church, century by century, never harshly, never in terror, always at the calm distance of an old dim painting seen across a quiet room. And then at the last we shall come home again to this present shore, and see how the drowned city is kept and remembered and honoured in our own day. That is the journey. And through the whole of it, I will hold the ending safe for you, and hand it back to you often, so that you never once need to worry how it turns out. You already know. It turns out gently. It turns out kept and remembered. It is all long over, and there is nothing in the dark. So for now, there is nothing more you need to do. Let the shore fade softly in the mind, the grey water and the low cliff and the pale shingle going dim and far away, like a picture in a book that is slowly being closed. Let the shoulders stay down where you have set them, and a little further still. Let the jaw stay loose, the breath stay long, the bed keep taking all of your weight. The story will keep. The city has waited 700 years beneath the water. It will wait, very patiently, for you, and you may let your eyes close now, and let yourself drift out, gentle as the tide, towards sleep. So before we go any further along this low and crumbling shore, before we turn time backward and begin to raise the great city up again out of the water. Let us settle ourselves once more, and let us set out plainly what kind of story this is going to be, because the kind of story matters, and this one is a very gentle kind, and knowing that now, at the very beginning, is part of how you will rest. Let your shoulders come down. Let them come down, and then a little further than that, further than you thought they could go, for they have most likely been carrying the day, quietly, without your noticing, the way shoulders do. Let the weight of them pour down your arms and out through your hands and away. Let your jaw loosen and hang a little slack, the teeth unclenched, the tongue soft in the mouth. Let the breath lengthen all on its own, without your steering it, a long, slow drawing in, and a longer, slower letting go, like the sea itself breathing far off in the dark. And let the bed take your weight. It is holding you entirely. There is nothing you need to hold up, nothing you need to keep watch over, no part of you that must stay braced. The bed has you. The dark has you. You may simply be here, warm and heavy and slow, and listen. Now, on some nights, on this quiet channel, the story we tell together is a hard one underneath its softness, a story of people driven from a place they loved by other people. There are nights when we walk through a valley emptied not by time but by a hand, where there were fires set to the roofs, and families put out onto the road, and a cruelty done that a heart still winces to hear of, even at the distance of long centuries. Those stories, too, can be told softly, and told kindly, and made safe to hold at bedtime, because they are long over, and cannot be undone, and cannot reach you. But they carry, always, somewhere near the bottom of them, a small hard stone of grievance, the knowledge that it need not have happened, that someone chose it, that there was a villain in the tale. Tonight there is no villain at all. Let that settle over you like an extra blanket, because it is the whole key to this night, and I will say it again and again as we go, softly, the way you smooth a coverlet flat. In the long, slow undoing of Dunwich, there is no one to blame. There was no fire. There was no eviction. There were no soldiers, no landlord, no order read out in a cold voice, no cruelty done by any hand at all. There is no wicked man in this story whose name you must hold and resent. There is only the sea, the patient, blameless, tireless sea, and the slow turning of the years, and the soft crumbling of a low cliff of sand and shingle, grain by grain and winter by winter, over the better part of 700 years. Some 7 centuries the taking took. That is longer than most nations last. That is longer than most memories reach, and across all that vast, unhurried span, no one did anything wrong. The city was not murdered. The city simply, slowly, gently came to its end, the way a great tree comes down at last in a wood, not felled, only grown old, and leaned upon by the weather, and let go of by the ground, and that, strange as it may sound, is a peculiarly restful thing to hold in the mind as you drift off. For there is a kind of sorrow that has no sting in it. There is a grief you can lay your whole weight upon, the way you are laying your weight on the bed, because it asks nothing of you, no anger, no putting right, no taking of sides. It is the sorrow you feel standing in an autumn wood when the leaves are coming down, the wistfulness of an evening drawing in, the tenderness of an old photograph of people long gone who were in their day happy. It does not wound. It only softens. It is the natural, wistful, blameless end of a thing that had its long day in the sun and then was quietly gathered back. And that is exactly the sorrow of Dunwich, a great and shining city, rich beyond its neighbours, proud and busy and sure of itself, given back to the sea so slowly that no single generation quite saw the whole of it go. A gentle sorrow, the gentlest sorrow there is. You are quite safe to rest your heart against it. Now let me lay out for you, softly, the shape of the nights ahead. Not so that you must remember any of it, for you needn't remember a word, but the way a good host before a long, slow journey tells you where the road will wind, so that once you are moving you can loosen your grip and simply watch the country go by. Knowing the shape of the thing is another way of setting down a worry. So here is the shape. First, over the coming chapters, we shall turn time gently backward. We shall walk away from this empty, wind-hushed shore where we are standing tonight, back and back, past the fallen towers and the vanished streets, until we come to the deep beginnings of the place, when it was already old while much of England was still forest and fen. And then, slowly and lovingly, with all the time in the world, we shall build the great city up again in the mind, whole and entire, its walls and its gates, its crowded timber houses leaning over narrow lanes, its marketplace, its many, many churches with their bells, its great harbour crammed with masts, its quays that smelled of tar and salt and the silver herring. We shall put the roofs back on and the people back in the streets. We shall let it be alive again, busy and loud and prosperous, for as long as we like. And, this is the important part, we shall come to love it. We must love it a little first. That is the whole point of raising it back up, so that when the sea comes for it, we feel it the way you are meant to feel it, tenderly, and not as a stranger reading a date on a stone. Then, once we love it, and only then, we shall watch the sea take it quietly back. Not all at once. Never all at once. Storm by storm, and century by century, the way it truly happened. We shall stand well back from the storms, at the safe distance of an old dim painting, and watch the great grey water come up the low cliff and carry the town away by pieces, a row of houses one winter, a church another, a whole quarter in a single wild night, and then long, long quiet stretches of years in between, when almost nothing changed, and the townsfolk very nearly forgot to be afraid. We shall watch the churches go out one by one, like candles at the end of a long evening, and because you already know how it ends, I have told you plainly. The city goes under, it is long gone, there will be no shock in it, no lurch, nothing waiting in the dark to startle you awake. You are not waiting to find out what happens. You already hold the ending, safe in your two hands. We are only walking down toward it together, slowly, in the warm, and last, when the water has done its long, unhurried work, we shall come home again to our own day, to the tiny hamlet on the cliff as it is now, and to all the tender ways the drowned city is still kept and remembered. The ruins that yet stand above the waves, the little museum that lovingly guards the whole tale, the old legend the fishermen tell, and the marvel of our own time, when the lost streets were found again out on the seabed and mapped and honoured. So the night does not end in loss. It never ends in loss on this channel. It ends in keeping. Remember that if you remember nothing else, as you go under, it ends in keeping. That is the whole shape of it. First we love the city, then we let the sea have it gently, then we find it kept and cherished still. And you may travel every mile of it lying exactly where you are, warm and unmoving, letting the words carry you. Let me set the wider country about us too, so that you know where in the world we are lying tonight. We are on the eastern shoulder of England, in that broad, low, quiet country they call East Anglia, the land of the East Angles, one of the old kingdoms, a country of wide skies and slow rivers and long horizons, flat enough that the sky seems to take up most of the world, so that a traveller there feels very small and the clouds seem very great. It is a soft country, made not of hard rock, but of sand and clay and shingle, heaped up long ago and never quite hardened, and along its seaward edge it lies open to the water, like a sleeper who has kicked off the covers. This is the Suffolk coast, Suffolk, the southern folk of the old East Angles, a coast of low crumbling cliffs the colour of weak honey, of long shingle beaches that hiss and rattle as the waves draw back, of reed beds and heath and marsh, and here and there a small grey town or a smaller grey hamlet holding on above the tide line. There is a great heath near where we stand, the heather-purple sandlings running down almost to the cliff, and marshes where the birds cry, and everywhere the smell of salt on the wind. It is a beautiful coast and a gentle one to the eye, but it is a soft coast, and that softness is the whole of the story. Because a soft cliff cannot stand for long against a hard sea. And the sea here is the North Sea, cold and grey and old and endlessly patiently hungry. It is not a warm blue sea of holidays. It is a working sea, a northern sea, the sea the herring came in on and the sea the storms came in on, a wide cold reach of water running up to the far countries of the north. It has been eating this coast for as long as there has been this coast to eat. It takes the land here in one place and heaps it up again in another a few miles down. It is forever unmaking and remaking the very edge of England, quietly, without malice, simply because that is what the sea does. It meant no harm to Dunwich. It means no harm to anything. It only comes, and comes and comes, the way it is coming now, far off in the dark beyond your window. You can almost hear it, that long, slow breathing, in and out, in and out, and in the fullness of enough centuries, the soft land yields, and the sea has what it came for. There is a great calm truth folded into all of this, and it is the truth I would have you rest upon tonight, the way you are resting upon the bed. It is simply this, that even great things pass. Even a rich and mighty city, sure it would stand until the end of the world, walled and churched and crowded and proud, can be taken slowly back into the quiet from which it came, and there is no shame in it, and no failure in it, and nothing to be feared in it. It is only the way of things. The tide comes in and the tide goes out. The leaves open and the leaves fall. Whatever is built up is, in its own long season, gently laid down again. You know this. You have lived long enough to know this in your bones, and it is not a cold knowledge, it is a warm one, once you stop struggling against it, warm as this bed. Because it means you may set down at last the heavy work of holding everything in its place. You do not have to hold anything in its place tonight. Not the city, not the day, not yourself. It is all held for you. And here is the other half of that truth, the half that mends the first, that even as the water takes the city, memory keeps it. What the sea took, the telling holds. The stones went under, but the story did not. The streets are gone from the map of the land, yet they are drawn again on the map of the sea, and drawn again in the mind. Tonight, in yours, nothing that is truly remembered is truly lost, and so we can afford to watch the whole slow drowning with an easy heart, because we already know that the city outlives its own ending. It lives on in the ruins that were kept, in the tale that was told, and in this quiet hour, in you. So let the sea breathe on, far off in the dark. Let the soft cliff crumble, grain by patient grain, as it has crumbled for 700 years and will crumble on long after tonight. None of it can reach you. All of it is long, long over, and gently ended, and safely held. There is nothing waiting to startle you, nothing sharp anywhere in the whole of this night, only a great old story being told slowly to help you down into sleep. Let your shoulders come down once more, a little further even than before. Let the jaw hang soft, the breath run long, the bed take the whole of your weight. And when you are ready, there is no hurry at all. There is never any hurry here. You may let your eyes close whenever they wish, and rest, while we make ready, on the next quiet night, to turn time all the way back to the very beginning, and find the great town when it was young. So let us turn the time gently backward now, slowly, the way you might turn the pages of a very old book by lamplight, in no hurry to reach the end, pausing on each page simply because it is lovely to look at. There is nothing here that will hurry you. Before we go, let your shoulders come down once more, come down from wherever they have quietly crept, and then let them come down a little further than that. Let the jaw loosen. Let the tongue rest soft behind the teeth. Let the breath grow long and unhurried, the way the tide is unhurried, going out and coming in without any thought of when it must arrive. And let the bed take your weight, the whole of it, the small held weight of you, the arms, the legs, the head grown heavy. Let the bed hold all of it, so that you need hold nothing at all. There is nothing in this chapter to keep watch against. We are only going to go a very long way back, softly, and marvel at how far back the roots of this vanished place reach, and everything we find there is long, long over, and perfectly safe to hold. For the strange thing about that low crumbling cliff, and that little grey sea, and that near-empty hamlet with its few houses and its wide quiet marshes, the strange thing is not only how much was lost, but how very old it all was to begin with. When we say that the great town went into the sea over the better part of 700 years, we are already speaking of a long span, longer than most of the histories that are told. But the town itself was old before that span even began. Its roots go down past the Normans, past the crowns and charters, down and down into an England you would hardly know, a wet, wooded, half-wild England of small kingdoms and forest tracts and unmapped fens. When much of the land you now think of as tidy and hedged and named was still trees and marsh, and the smoke of scattered timber halls rising through the mist. And even then, even in that dim and distant morning of the country, there was already something here on this stretch of the Suffolk shore. Already, on this soft cliff above a fine natural harbour, there were people, and boats, and prayers said, and a name. Let us give that far country its true name, gently, so it does not frighten by its strangeness. This eastern shoulder of England, the wide low land that bulges out into the North Sea, that you would find today by the names of Norfolk and Suffolk, was in those far centuries the kingdom of the East Angles. East Anglia, we still call the region, keeping their name in our mouths without always knowing whose name it is. The Angles were one of the peoples who had crossed the grey water from the old continent, from the flat lands about the mouths of the northern rivers, and settled here on this eastern coast that faced back the way they had come. And they made of it a kingdom, one of several that shared out the island between them in those days, before there was any single England at all. It was a land of small wooden towns and great earthen halls, of ploughland won painfully from the wood, of rivers that were the true roads, and of a long sandy sea edge where boats came and went with the trade and the fish. And somewhere along that sea edge, on its low cliff, our place was already quietly beginning. A harbour, a huddle of dwellings, a landing where the boats drew up. It was a good place to be. The harbour was one of the finest on the whole of that coast, a natural haven where a river met the sea, sheltered enough to hold ships and open enough to let them go. Places like that do not stay small. Places like that gather people to them, the way a warm hearth gathers a room, and this one gathered, and grew old in the growing. Let yourself dwell there a moment, unhurried, in that far kingdom of the East Angles, for it is a restful thing to sit in. Picture the low green land under a wide and changing sky, the sea to the east always murmuring its one long word. Picture the small wooden churches not yet built, and the great forests not yet felled, and the people going quietly about the old work of living, the ploughing, the fishing, the mending of nets and the setting of thatch. There were kings in that land, and their names come down to us worn and strange, half legend now. There were feuds and harvests and long winters by the fire, and the slow passing of the seasons that has always been the truest clock of any country. It was a whole world, complete in itself, sure of itself, and it did not know that it was young, any more than a child knows it is young. And in the midst of that world, on its eastern edge, our town was already keeping its place upon the cliff, already old among the young. And into that far kingdom, in those far years, there came the thing that would shape the whole later life of the town. There came the faith. For our story, remember, is above all a story of churches, of a skyline crowded with towers and spires, of bells beyond counting ringing out over the water, and all of that, the whole of that long chorus of stone and bronze, has its first small beginning here, in the coming of Christianity to the East Angles. And it came, as the old accounts tell it, through one gentle and patient man. His name was Felix, Felix of Burgundy, for he had come from that far inland country of Burgundy, away in the middle of the continent, over the sea and over the land, to this raw, wet kingdom at the edge of the world. He came, it is said, at the invitation of the king of the East Angles, to teach the faith to a people who did not yet know it, and he laboured here among them for many years. Patiently, kindly, building up the young church in this eastern land the way a gardener builds up a garden from bare ground, slowly, tending it, expecting to see little of the harvest himself. And because a church must have a seat, a chief place, a mother town from which the bishop keeps and shepherds the whole flock, there was founded here the first bishopric of the East Angles, the first seat of a bishop in all that eastern kingdom. Around the year 630 this was, as near as the old reckonings can carry us, 1300 years and more before your own quiet night. Think of that gently. 13 centuries. So far back that the very language then spoken here would sound to you now like the speech of another world. So far back that nearly everything you could name of the England you know had not yet been dreamed. And already then there was a bishop's seat upon this coast, and already this place was reckoned important enough, settled enough, old enough, to be made the heart of a whole kingdom's new-planted faith. Now here I must be honest with you, softly, the way a good storyteller ought to be, for part of the deep rest of this night is that nothing is being hidden from you, nothing is being propped up brighter than it truly stands. The old tradition says that Felix set his bishop's seat at a place the early writers called Dunwich, and long, long has that name Dunwich been understood to mean our town, this town, Dunwich upon its cliff. For centuries it was told and believed, and repeated, that here, precisely here, was the cradle of the East Anglian Church, that under these very grey waves, could you but reach them, lie the foundations of Felix's first cathedral. It is a beautiful belief, and an old one, and much loved, but you should know, resting there, that the learned are not all agreed upon it. Dunwich is only a name in a few very old books, and the books do not draw maps, and some scholars, turning the matter over as scholars will, have wondered whether that first seat might have stood not here at all, but a little way down the coast, at another old shore place, away toward where Felixstowe now keeps a shape of the saint's own name. No one can now say exactly. The sea, which took so much, took this certainty too, and rubbed the edges from the story until we cannot quite see where the truth of it stands. And that is all right. You need not settle it tonight. The wise have not settled it in 1,000 years of trying, and no harm has come of the not knowing. Let it be enough, and it is more than enough, to hold the gentle sense of the thing, that here or hereabouts, on this very stretch of soft Suffolk shore, in the deep morning of English history, the faith came in, and a bishop sat, and a small sea town was already old and honoured enough to be counted worthy of it. Whether the first stone stood on this exact cliff, or on the next headland along, the marvel is the same. How far, how very far, the roots of this drowned place reach down. And it comforts me, and I hope it comforts you, to hold both the certainty and the doubt in the one open hand, without needing to close the hand on either. For that is truly how it is with things this old. They come to us not as bright hard facts, but as a kind of glow, a warmth left in the ground, a name half remembered, a tradition lovingly kept, an old account that says it was so, and cannot quite prove it, and does not need to. We are not sitting in judgment here. We are only wondering slowly in the dark at how old this is, and letting the wonder soften us towards sleep. So picture it then, not sharply, not with the hard edges of a photograph, but dim and gold and soft, the way you might half see it in an old and darkened painting on the wall of a quiet room. Picture England as it was in those far years while our town was already taking root. Much of the land still under the trees, the great woods that once ran on and on, oak and ash and thorn, with the wolf still in them and the wild deer, and only here and there a clearing where men had burned and cut and planted. A patch of ploughland with its low houses, its byre, its wisp of smoke. The fens still wide and reedy and full of birds, the rivers wandering where they pleased, the roads few and rough, and often only the rivers themselves. A quiet land, an unfinished land, sparsely peopled, its towns small and made of wood, its greatness all still ahead of it. And along the eastern edge of all that, facing the grey and patient sea, our place already gathered and busy in its small way, the harbour holding its boats, the fishermen going out onto the water and coming back, the trade beginning to come and go, the first churches rising, timber then perhaps and later stone, and the bishop, whoever and wherever exactly he was, keeping the young faith of a young kingdom. Old already, important already, rooted already, so deep in the ground of the country's beginning that by the time the later centuries came, the centuries of charters and merchants and crowded spires that we shall come to on the nights ahead, the town could look back on a past so long that even then no one quite remembered its start. It was, you might say, a place that had always been there in the memory of everyone who lived near it. It seemed as fixed as the coast itself. It seemed one of the things that simply were, and always had been, and always would be. That, of course, is the tender heart of the whole matter, and I will only touch it lightly here, the way you touch a bruise gently to be sure it is healing, and then leave it be. For all its age, for all its deep old roots, for all that it seemed as permanent as the shore, it was not permanent. The very thing that made it, the sea and its fine harbour, was the thing that would one day quietly unmake it. But that is far off yet, both in the story and in the safety of this night. We are not there. We are here, at the very beginning, in the dim gold morning of the place, marvelling at how far back it goes, and everything ahead of it, every storm and every loss, has already happened, long ago, and is long over, and cannot reach you where you lie. You know already how the story ends. You know the sea comes slowly and takes it, and is not cruel in the taking, and that the city is remembered still, mapped and honoured and told, even here, even now, even in you. So there is nothing to dread in going back to the beginning. The beginning is only lovely. The beginning is only an old sea town on a soft cliff, 1,300 years ago and more, with the faith newly come to it, and its whole long life still before it, all its bells still unhung, all its merchants unborn, all its sorrow still sleeping under the calm grey water that had not yet begun to rise against it. Rest there a while, in that dim gold morning. Let the great age of the place settle over you like a warm and heavy quilt, the sheer depth of the years, the sense of standing at the very root of a thing so old that its beginning is lost in kindly mist. There is a peace in old things, in things that were here so long before us, and will be spoken of so long after. A peace in being a small quiet part of a very long story that is already told. Let your breath go long again. Let the bed hold you. Let the far-off harbour with its old boats, and the patient saint at his patient work, and the young kingdom under its wide sky, all grow soft and dim and drift a little further off, the way the shore drifts from a boat that is putting gently out to sea. There is nothing more you need do tonight, and nothing more you need to hold. And if your eyes have grown heavy with all this old and gentle age, if the lids wish to come down as the long years come down, then you may let your eyes close whenever they wish, and simply rest while we go on, softly, into the making of the great town itself. And so, having wandered back through those first far centuries, the coming of St. Felix, the old bishop's seat, the town already ancient on its cliff while much of England lay under forest and marsh, let us now come forward a little, only a little, into the years when the great city stood at its very fullest and finest. There is nothing to brace for here. We are only going to build it again, quietly, in the warm dark behind your eyes, stone by stone and street by street, and walk through it together the way you might walk through a town in a dream, unhurried unafraid, knowing already that all of it is long, long over and safe. So before we go in through the gate, let your shoulders come down once more. Down. And then a little further than that. Further than you thought they could go. Let the jaw loosen. Let the breath grow long and slow and easy. And let the bed take the whole of your weight, all of it, so that you have nothing at all to hold up. There, now we may go and see the city while it was whole. Picture the years then of the 12th century and the 13th, some 800 years ago, and more, for that was the great high noon of Dunwich, the summer of its long day. By the time the king's men rode out across England to make the Domesday Book, that great survey and reckoning of the whole realm set down in the year 1086, Dunwich was already counted among the larger and the wealthier towns in all the land, not a mere fishing village, not a huddle of huts, but a true town, a place of substance and standing, that a king would trouble to know the measure of. And in the 2 centuries that followed it only grew, and grew richer, and grew prouder, until it stood as one of the foremost ports on the whole eastern coast of England, a walled borough, a self-governing town, sure of itself and of its place in the world. The old accounts, when they try to give it size, reach for figures that seem almost too large for the quiet green field that lies there now, and no one can now say exactly how many souls lived within its bounds. For such counts were not kept as we keep them today. So we shall not pretend to a number. We shall only let ourselves feel the greatness of it, a busy, crowded, thriving place, thousands strong, a town that thought itself, and was thought by others, to be one of the great towns of the kingdom. Come then in through one of the town gates, for a walled town has its gates, its ways in and out, watched and shut at night. Behind you, if you turned, you would see the earthwork and the bank that girded the landward side, the town bank they called it, a great ridge of raised earth, and along it a ditch, and the gates set into it where the roads came in, and within the town. Let it rise around you slowly. Narrow streets, unpaved or roughly cobbled, running this way and that. Not in the neat squares of a modern city, but wandering as old towns wander, following the lie of the land and the memory of older paths. And crowding close on either side, the houses, timber-framed, most of them, built of oak beams and wattle and daub, that mixture of woven sticks and clay and straw that our forebears daubed between the timbers to make a wall, their upper stories leaning out a little over the street, so that neighbours across the way might almost have shaken hands from their windows, smoke rising from the roofs, thatched or tiled. The good stone houses of the richer merchants standing here and there among the rest, more solid, more proud. And everywhere the sound of a living town, the creak of carts, the cry of the water seller and the fishwife, the ring of the smith's hammer, the barking of dogs, the shouts of children, the tramp of feet on the worn ways. Let the street bring you, as every town's streets bring you, to the marketplace, the beating middle of it all. Here the town gathered. Here on market days the stalls stood in their rows, and the country folk came in from the villages round about with their eggs and their fowls and their cheeses and their bundled wool, and the town's own tradesmen cried their wares, the baker, the butcher, the chandler with his candles, the dyer with his cloth. Here goods that had come off the ships at the quays were spread for sale, and things you would not think to find in a little Suffolk village would lie there among the ordinary plenty, bolts of foreign cloth, and casks of wine from over the water, and spices, and worked things brought from far away. It is a bustling, good-humoured, ordinary sort of scene, the market of a rich town. Nothing in it to trouble the heart, and you may stand at the edge of it as long as you like, in the mild noise and the movement, and simply watch, the way you might watch a scene in an old dim painting, warm and far away and asking nothing of you. And notice, as you stand there, the sort of people who move through it, for a rich port draws all sorts. The merchants in their good wool gowns, purposeful and prosperous, men whose ships and warehouses made them near as grand as any country lord, and who knew it. The craftsman at their doors, the cooper hooping his barrels, the rope-maker and the sail-maker whose trades a harbour town must have, the tanner and the tailor and the goldsmith, the friars, grey-robed or black-robed, going quietly 2 by 2 on their errands of preaching and of charity, the sailors and the fishermen rolling up from the quays with the sea still on them, country wives and serving girls and the children underfoot, a whole world of folk, high and low, going about an ordinary day that they thought would be followed by 10,000 more just like it, and it is a kindly thing, is it not, to stand among them for a moment in the mind, and to wish them well, and to know that their day was a good one, and that whatever came after came so softly and so slowly that not one of them, in that market noon, need have felt a shadow of it. But if you lift your eyes now up above the leaning roofs and the smoke and the market din, then you begin to see what truly made Dunwich Dunwich, what made travellers marvel at it, and what makes us marvel still: the churches. For this was, above all things, a city of churches, a whole skyline of towers and spires standing up against the grey light off the sea, and a whole air full, at the right hours, of the sound of bells. It is said, and here we must say it gently, it is said, the old accounts tell, for the exact count is one of those things that no one can now be quite sure of. It is said that Dunwich had many parish churches within its walls, more than a small town has any need of church upon church, each with its own parish and its own people and its own patron saint and its own bell in its own tower. Let their names come softly, one after another, like the bells themselves telling over the hours. There was St. John the Baptist, the greatest of them all, the chief church of the town, large and rich and proud, standing near the market, the mother church whose bells would have carried furthest. And there was St. Leonard, and St. Martin, and St. Nicholas, the sailor's own saint, the one the seafaring men prayed to, and no wonder in a town so wedded to the sea. There was St. Peter, that would stand long after many of its sisters had gone. There was St. Michael, and there were others whose very names have grown faint with the centuries. And there was All Saints. Hold that name gently, and set it aside for now, for All Saints has its own quiet part to play far on in our story, being the last of them all to keep its watch above the water, but that is for another night, and there is no need to think of it yet. Tonight we need only see them all standing together, whole and sound and full of light, their towers up in the sea air, their bells hung and ready. And the churches were not the half of it. For Dunwich, being a great and pious town, drew to itself the religious houses as well, the orders of friars and monks who built their friaries and their houses of prayer within it or hard against its walls. There were the Grey Friars, so called for the grey habits they wore, the Franciscans, followers of St. Francis, whose friary stood on the higher ground, and their ruins, the broken arches and the old precinct wall, are the one great relic of medieval Dunwich that you may still walk among today, up on the cliff, but again that is for the far end of our story, and I only mention it now so you may know that they were there. And there were the Black Friars, the Dominicans, in their black cloaks, with their own house of preaching. 2 whole orders of friars in one town, and each with its church and its cloister and its round of prayer kept up day and night, the plain song rising and falling behind the walls at every one of the appointed hours, so that even at dead of night, when the town lay sleeping and the streets were dark, there were voices somewhere lifted in quiet devotion, keeping the watches of the night while the sea whispered far below. And it is said there was a preceptory of the Knights Templar as well, the Templars, that famous order of warrior monks, sworn to the protection of pilgrims, who held lands and houses all across Christendom, and they too had their establishment here, adding their round of prayer to all the rest. And there were the hospitals, not hospitals as we mean the word now, but houses of charity and care for the sick and the poor and the traveller, the leper hospital of St. James, set a little apart as such houses always were, where those poor souls afflicted with that slow disease were tended and given shelter, and the Maison Dieu, the house of God, in the old French of the day. Another such refuge for the needy and the ailing and the wayfarer. Care for the broken and the stranger woven right into the fabric of the town. Do you feel it now, the greatness of the place? Not as a list of names to be remembered, for there will be no remembering asked of you tonight, but simply as a weight and a fullness. A richness stand again in the middle of it, in the dusk of an ordinary evening some 800 years ago, and only listen. From this tower, and then from that one, and then from another away across the roofs, the bells begin, calling the townsfolk to the evening prayer, telling over the hours of the day, church answering church across the crowded streets. The great deep bell of St. John the Baptist, under the lighter voices of the smaller churches, all of them ringing out together over the timber roofs and over the quays, and out across the wide dark water. A whole city of spires and bells, standing on its low cliff above the sea. That is the picture to hold. That is the thing that was here, where the empty green field and the sound of the surf are now. And you must not let the emptiness that is there today creep back into the picture yet. There is no need. Not tonight. Keep the city whole. Keep the bells ringing, for we have promised you and I to hold the ending safe the whole way through, and part of holding it safe is this, that before we ever watch the sea take so much as a single stone, we let ourselves love the city entire, standing in its full pride, believing, as every soul within it believed, that it would stand so for 1,000 years. They could not have known otherwise. Walking those streets in the lamplight, hearing those bells, a man or a woman of medieval Dunwich would have felt the town as solid and as lasting as the ground under their feet, more lasting surely than any one life. And in a way they were not so wrong, for here we are, some 8 centuries on, in the quiet of your own room, and the town is standing again, whole, in your mind's eye.
The bells are ringing again! Nothing has fallen! Nothing is falling! It is all held! And it is all safe! And it is all so very long ago!
Rest there a while then in the whole and living city, and let the churches keep their steady chimes somewhere at the edge of your hearing, soft as a heartbeat, no more troubling than that. You have nothing to do here and nowhere to be. Let the market noise fade to a gentle blur. Let the towers stand black and calm against the last of the light. Let your breath go long and slow with the slow tolling of the bells. Down came those shoulders a while ago, and let them stay down. Let the bed hold you. Let the warm dark of the old town settle over you like a blanket drawn up in the evening. For tomorrow, or whenever next you come back to this quiet shore with me, we shall go down from the streets to the water's edge, down to the great harbour at the mouth of the river, where the ships lay crowded at the quays, and we shall find out what it was that made all this greatness possible, the herring and the trade and the tall ships coming in on the tide. But there is no need to go anywhere now. The harbour will keep, the ships will keep, the whole long story will keep, safe and whole, until you are ready for it. Tonight there is only the finished city, standing full and fair over its sea, its bells ringing softly down the years, and you, warm and easy and drifting, held in the sound of them. You may let your eyes close now, whenever they wish. The bells will go on ringing, gentle and far, all the while you slip away towards sleep, and so, with the great city standing whole again in your mind, its walls, its gates, its crowded timber houses, and its high skyline of spires and bells against the sea, let us come down now from those towers, down the sloping lanes, past the marketplace and the merchants' houses, down to the water's edge, where the true heart of the town beat loudest of all. Before we go, though, let yourself settle a little deeper into the warmth where you are lying. Let your shoulders come down, and then a little further than that, further than you thought they could go. Let the jaw loosen, let the breath lengthen and grow slow, and let the bed take your whole weight, so that you are held, entirely held, and need carry nothing at all. There is nothing here to startle you tonight. Everything I am about to show you is long, long over, some 700 years and more gone by, and you already know how it ends. So you may simply wander through it, the way you might wander through the rooms of an old and kindly painting, in no hurry, safe the whole while. Come down then to the harbour. For all the churches and all the fine houses, it was the harbour that made Dunwich what it was. The great harbour at the mouth of the Dunwich River, which men also knew as the Blythe, where the slow brown water of the estuary came sliding out at last to meet the wide grey reach of the North Sea. It was, the old accounts tell, one of the finest harbours on the whole east coast of England, a broad and sheltered water where the tide came in and the tide went out, and where, at the height of the town's greatness, you might have counted more ships riding at anchor than you could easily number. Picture it as it was on an ordinary morning, with the mist just lifting off the river and the light coming up pale and silver over the sea. The water crowded with hulls, the tall bare masts standing close together like a little leafless winter wood, swaying ever so gently on the swell, so that the whole forest of them nodded and creaked as one. And along the shore the quays, the wooden staiths and jetties and landing places, black with tar and wet with the tide, running out into the water on their weathered legs, and on the quays all the long day. The noise and the business and the bustling plenty of a great port at its very height. Breathe it in, if you will, gently, the way you might breathe in the smell of a harbour on a soft morning. There is the sharp, clean bite of salt, always, the salt of the open sea. There is the dark, sweetish smell of tar and pitch, warmed in the sun, where the shipwrights have been paying the seams of a hull. There is the smell of new rope and old timber, of wet sailcloth, of wood smoke, drifting down from the town. And over all of it, threaded through everything, morning and noon and night, there is the smell of fish, the silver, oily, unmistakable smell of the herring, which was, more than anything else in the world, the smell of Dunwich, and the thing that had built it. For the herring was the lifeblood of the town. It was the herring that filled the merchants' purses and raised the church's towers and fed the thousands who lived crowded along that cliff. You must understand what a marvel the herring were, those small silver fish that came, every year, in their countless millions, moving down the North Sea in autumn in shoals, so vast that the sea itself was said to change its colour where they passed, a living silver river within the grey. And the men of Dunwich went out to meet them. Picture the autumn coming on, the days shortening, the first real weight of cold in the wind off the water, and the whole town turning its face to the fishing. Picture the boats made ready, the nets mended and barked brown against the rot, the fleets going out, dozens upon dozens of little vessels slipping down the river and out past the harbour mouth into the open sea, their brown sails leaning to the wind, growing small and then smaller, until they were only a scatter of dark specks far out on the pale water, and then gone over the edge of the world. And out there, through the long nights of the herring season, they fished. They shot their drift nets in the dusk and let them hang like curtains in the dark water, and they waited through the cold hours while the silver fish swam blind into the mesh, and were caught fast by the gills, a whole night's patient work, the little boats rising and falling on the swell under the great wheel of the stars, the men muffled against the cold, watching the horizon for the first grey of the dawn. And then, at first light, the hauling, the heavy dripping nets drawn up hand over the side, and the fish coming up with them, a shining, streaming, silver harvest pouring into the bottom of the boat until it lay heaped and gleaming from stem to stern. You need not trouble yourself with the hardness of that labour. Out on the cold sea in the dark, those men are long at rest now, every one, these many centuries. Only let yourself see the beauty of it from a gentle distance, the silver flood coming up out of the black water into the first pale light, and let the wonder of it settle you, and the safe knowledge that it is all long finished, and finished well. Then home. Picture the fleet coming back on the morning tide, low in the water now, heavy with the catch. sliding one after another in past the harbour mouth to the crowded quays, and the whole shore waking to receive them. For the catching was only the beginning. The true business began the moment the fish came ashore. The herring would not keep. A fish so rich and oily spoils quickly, and so the town had learned, over long generations, the patient arts of curing, of making the silver harvest keep through all the year and travel far across the sea. Picture the quays and the yards behind them, and the great work going forward there through the autumn. The women and the children and the old folk gutting the fish with quick shore knives, faster than the eye could follow, the little bodies flashing through their hands, the fish packed down in barrels between thick layers of salt, white salt, brought in by the ton for just this purpose, to make the salt herring that would keep for a 12-month and be sold the length of the kingdom and beyond. And the smokehouses, the curing sheds, where other fish were hung in their thousands over slow oak smoke, day and night, to come out golden and firm and fragrant. The red herring, as they called it, while the blue haze of the smoke leaned away from the town on the sea wind, and could be smelled, they say, far out at sea, so that a mariner might know he was nearing Dunwich by the very scent of it on the breeze. And out from all this labour flowed the trade, for a town does not grow great merely by catching fish, but by selling them, and by all the coming and going of goods that a busy harbour draws to itself. So let your mind widen now, out from the herring quays to the whole broad commerce of the port. From Dunwich the ships went out laden, with the salted and smoked herring, packed in their thousands of barrels, and with wool above all, the good English wool of the Suffolk flocks, the great wealth of medieval England, gathered inland and brought down to the coast, and shipped across the narrow sea to be woven in the looms of Flanders. And into Dunwich the ships came home again laden with all the good things of other lands. Wine came in, the red wine of Gascony, of France, brought over the sea in great casks and rolled up the quays to the merchants' cellars. Timber came in from the north, and cloth, and salt, and all manner of wares, and the little town on its cliff sat at the meeting place of all of it, a knot tied in the long threads of the sea roads, its wealth flowing in and out on every tide. And where the trade flowed, there the merchants grew rich, and Dunwich had merchants indeed, prosperous burgesses whose fortunes were made upon the herring and the wool and the wine. Picture them along the quays in their good warm cloth, their fur-trimmed gowns, standing among the barrels and the bales with a clerk at the elbow keeping the tally, men who owned ships and owned warehouses, and owned the fine tall houses up in the town, and who could reckon in their heads the worth of a fleet's whole catch, or the price of wool in the markets of Flanders that season. Picture the counting done, the coins told out, the bargains struck with a spit and a handclasp on the wet boards of the Staith. Picture the fish market at its busiest, the barrows and the baskets, the crying of prices, the housewives of the town choosing their supper from the morning's landing, the carters loading the salted barrels to go inland to the towns that had no sea of their own. There was money in that town, real money, gathered up out of the cold sea a herring at a time, and turned into stone churches and silver plate and painted glass. And the merchants of Dunwich walked their own quays like men who knew, to the last penny, exactly what their town was worth, and never doubted for a moment that it would go on being worth it, and more for 100 generations yet to come. For Dunwich looked outward, always across the water. Its true neighbours were not only the villages of the Suffolk shore, but the far ports across the sea. There were the busy trading towns of Flanders, close cousins across the narrow water, hungry for English wool. There was France and the wine country to the south. And there were the far northern fishing grounds, the cold rich seas away up toward Iceland and the north, where in time the boldest of the Dunwich men would sail in search of yet greater catches. Months away from home on the grey northern ocean. It was a town whose imagination ran out along the sea lanes to half the coasts of the known world, a small place on a crumbling cliff, and yet a place that stood, in its way at the very edge of everything, with the whole wide sea for its high road. And to carry all this trade, the town built ships, for Dunwich was not only a harbour, but a place of shipwrights and shipyards, where the vessels themselves were made. Picture the building yards along the shore, and the slow patient craft going on there, the great curved ribs of a new hull standing up bare against the sky like the bones of some vast creature. The shipwrights swarming over them with adze and auger and mallet, the smell of fresh-cut oak and hot pitch, the steady knocking of the caulkers' mallets driving the oakum into the seams, and, now and then, the launching, when a finished ship went down the slipway into her own element for the first time and settled onto the water and floated, and the whole yard cheered. The men of Dunwich built their own boats, and sailed them, and knew every timber in them, and knew the sea they sailed, as well as they knew the lanes of their own town. And because they had ships, and because they had men who knew the sea, the town served its king. For in those days there was no standing royal navy as we would think of it, but when the king went to war and needed ships for his fleets, he called upon his great seaports to furnish them, and Dunwich was among the foremost of them, sending its vessels and its mariners to serve the crown in time of war. So the same ships that carried herring and wool in time of peace might, in time of war, carry soldiers and archers, and the same men who fished the autumn shoals might find themselves manning the king's fleet against his enemies across the sea. It was a proud thing, and the town knew it to be a proud thing. That little Dunwich on its Suffolk cliff should be reckoned among the ports whose ships the King of England counted on when he had need. There is no need to follow those ships into any battle tonight. Let them only stand for the standing and the honour of the place, a town great enough that the crown itself leaned upon it. So there it is, the working heart of the great city laid open before you, the crowded harbour with its nodding forest of masts, the herring fleets going out and the silver harvest coming home, the curing yards and the smokehouses, the wool going out and the wine coming in, the shipyards ringing with the mallets, the sea roads running away to Flanders and France and the far cold north, and the king's own ships riding at the quays, a place of tar and salt and fish and money and endless cheerful noise, a place of plenty, sure of itself, rich beyond the dreams of the little villages round about, its purses full, and its future, as it seemed, wide open as the sea. On a good autumn day at the height of its greatness, standing on those crowded quays with the fish coming ashore in their silver thousands, and the ships crowding the water and the smoke of the curing houses leaning away on the wind, you would have thought, anyone would have thought, that such a place could never come to any end, that the sea which had made it rich would surely go on making it rich for ever and ever. But you know better, lying there so warm and so safe. You know how gently and how slowly it all came to its long close. And that is a thing to rest upon, not to grieve over, for tonight the harbour is full again, and the ships are riding at anchor, and the silver fish are pouring up out of the water into the morning light, and all of it is held perfectly safe in the telling, exactly as it was, with nothing waiting in the dark to trouble you at all. Let the picture of it grow soft and dim now, the way a warm scene does when sleep begins to come, the masts nodding, the smoke drifting, the gulls turning slowly over the water. Let your breath go long and easy. Let the bed hold your weight. And you may let your eyes close whenever they wish, and drift a while on that gentle tide, and I will keep the harbour safe for you, and be here still when you are ready to go on. So let us step back a little way from the quays now, back from the smell of tar and salt and the silver spill of the herring. And let the noise of the harbour soften behind us, and as we do, let your shoulders come down again, come down and then a little further than that, further than you thought they could go. Let the jaw loosen, let the breath lengthen all on its own, and let the bed take the whole of your weight, for there is nothing here you need to hold. We have seen the working heart of the great city, its ships and its trade and its wealth won from the sea, and now, gently, we are going to fill in the rest of it, the people themselves, and the way they governed themselves, and the faith that ran through all their days like a thread through cloth. And you may hold, as you always may, the ending that we settled long ago, and that we carry safe the whole way through, that all of this is long, long over, gone under the water some centuries since, taken slowly and without cruelty, and remembered still. So there is nothing waiting in the dark of this story to trouble you, nothing to startle you awake, only an old town to walk through in the dim warm light of the imagination, the way you might walk through a painting. For the great town of Dunwich, you must understand, was not only rich, it was proud, and it was free, and it knew its own importance the way a person in the fullness of their years knows their own name. It was what the old world called a borough, that is to say, a town that governed itself, that stood a little apart from the ordinary run of the countryside around it, with rights and liberties of its own that it guarded jealously and wore like a good cloak. In an age when most men and women lived under the hand of some lord, bound to his land and his mill and his will, the burgesses of Dunwich, its free townsmen, its citizens, held their liberties direct, and were beholden to no local lord, but, in a manner of speaking, to the king himself. And these liberties were not a matter of custom only, of the way things had always been done. They were written down, sealed in wax and parchment, in royal charters, grand documents in which the crown itself set out, in the slow ceremonious language of the law, what the town might do and how it might rule itself. Many of Dunwich's charters, the old accounts tell, date from the reign of King John. That king of the early 13th century, some 800 years ago now, whose name you may know from other stories, and to hold a charter from the king's own hand was, for a town, the very proof of its greatness. It meant the town could hold its own courts and judge its own people. It could keep the tolls and customs of its market and its harbour for itself. It could choose its own officers to govern it, and govern itself it did. At the head of the town stood not a lord but its bailiffs. You might think of them as something like mayors, the chief men of the place, chosen from among the townsfolk to keep order, to hold the courts, to collect the dues, to answer for the town to the crown. Under them and around them were the burgesses, the free citizens, and the aldermen, the elder men of weight and substance, gathered in council to order the affairs of the borough, where the market should stand, how the quays should be kept, what should be done when a ship was wrecked or a debt unpaid, or a stranger sought to trade within the walls. And the town had its seal, and here is a small thing that I love, and that I think you will love too, lying warm in the dark. For a borough, like a great man, had its own seal, a device pressed into wax to make its documents true and binding, and on the seal of Dunwich there were ships. Ships, of course, what else could that town have chosen to speak for itself? Not a saint, though it had saints in plenty, not a king, though it held the king's charters, but ships, riding the little carved waves, with their high prows and their single masts and their furled sails, the very ships that made the town what it was. When the burgesses of Dunwich set their seal to a paper, they pressed the sea itself into the wax, the sea that had made them, the sea that would one day, patiently and without malice, unmake them. But they did not think of that on the days they governed. They thought of their liberties and their trade and their standing among the towns of England, and they had every reason to think well of themselves, for their standing was high indeed. The town was rich enough and old enough and free enough that it sent its own members to Parliament, to the great council of the realm, where the king took counsel with the lords and the commons of his land. To send members to Parliament was a mark of the first rank. It meant a town was reckoned among the places that mattered, whose voice was worth the hearing, whose men sat among the burgesses of the other great towns of the kingdom to grant taxes and hear grievances and share, in their small way, in the governing of England. And there were the guilds too, those brotherhoods of craft and trade, of the men who worked in one mystery or another, the merchants and the mariners and the makers, banded together for their common good, keeping the standards of their trade, caring for their own in sickness and in age, burying their dead with candles and prayers, feasting together on their patron saint's day. A guild was a fellowship, and a charity, and a company all at once, and a town thick with guilds was a town where men belonged to one another, held together in 100 quiet knots of duty and kindness and shared work. So there it stood, you can see it, can you not, if you let the picture come softly, a whole rounded world upon its cliff, a free town, governing itself, sending its voice to Parliament, sealing its papers with ships, ordered by its bailiffs and its burgesses and its guilds, sure to the very marrow of its bones that it was a great place and would remain one. And through all of that ordinary, confident, busy life there ran the faith, woven so deep into the days that no one could have picked it out from the rest, any more than you could pick one thread of warp from a finished cloth. For consider only the sound of the place, and let this sound settle you, for it is the gentlest sound in the whole of this story. We spoke on an earlier night of all the churches of Dunwich, that skyline crowded with towers, St. John the Baptist the greatest of them, and St. Leonard and St. Martin and St. Nicholas and St. Peter and all saints, and more besides, and the friars' houses too, the Grey Friars and the Black Friars. Now think what it was to live beneath all those towers. Every one of them held its bells, and the bells ordered the hours of every single day. There were no clocks in the houses then, no small bright screens, no little machines to chime the time. The day was measured by the bells, and the bells were rung to the round of prayer. Before the light, the bells, and again at the growing of the morning, and at the middle of the day. And in the long slope of the afternoon, and at the falling of the dark, and last of all the curfew, the bell that told the town to cover its fires and take to its beds. That word curfew, you may like to know, comes from the old French, couvre-feu, cover the fire, a bell rung at nightfall, so that no hearth left burning should set the timber town alight in the night. So the whole of a life in Dunwich was cradled in bells, from the first grey ringing before dawn to the last soft toll of the curfew, and a child born in that town grew up never once out of their hearing, and an old man dying in that town went out of the world upon their sound. Hold that, tonight, a town rocked in the ringing of its bells, hour after hour, day upon day, year upon year, the sound going out over the roofs and out over the water, and losing itself at last in the great grey patience of the sea. And the year, too, was ordered by the faith, turning like a slow wheel through its feasts. There were the great church feasts that everyone kept, the deep midwinter joy of Christmas with its candles against the longest nights, the solemn fasting of Lent, when the town ate its salt fish and waited, and then the flowering of Easter, and the bright feasts of the summer saints. And every parish had its own patron, its own saint's day, when the church was dressed and the people gathered, St. John, St. Leonard, St. Martin, St. Nicholas, each with its day in the round of the year, so that scarcely a season passed without some feast to mark it. There were the markets, weekly and busy, the country folk coming in from the sandlings and the farms with their eggs and their fowls and their wool to set beside the fish of the town, and the fairs, the great fairs that fell on certain holy days, when Dunwich filled up past its ordinary crowd with traders and peddlers and pilgrims and players, and the streets were loud and thick, and a man might buy a thing he could buy on no other day of the year. And the faith was not only bells and feasts and preaching, it was care too, the plain, practical, everyday care of the weak by the strong, of the sick by the whole, of the stranger by the settled. For a great town such as this had its houses of charity, its hospitals, though you must not think of a hospital then as we think of one now, all white and busy with machines. A hospital in that old world was a house of hospitality, a place of shelter and mercy, where the poor and the aged and the ailing might be taken in, given a bed and a bowl and a kind word and the prayers of the house. There was, the old accounts tell, the leper hospital of St. James, set a little apart as such houses always were, where those with that slow sad sickness might be cared for and prayed over and kept from want, and there was the Maison Dieu. The name is old French again, and means simply the house of God, a name they gave to such almshouses of charity, where the town's poor and broken might find a roof. So even the softest and least of the townsfolk, even those who could work no more and had no one, were held within the wide arms of the place, gathered in, not cast out. Hold that too tonight, for it is a warm thing to hold, that the great proud town, for all its ships and charters and pride, kept houses whose whole work was gentleness. And the friars walked among them all. That was the work of the friars, not to shut themselves away, as the older monks had done in their great abbeys inland, but to go out into the towns, into the very streets and market-places, and preach to the ordinary folk in their own plain tongue. So on a market day you might have seen a grey-robed friar of the Greyfriars, the Franciscans, standing at a corner or upon a step, preaching to the crowd that gathered round him, of sin and mercy, of the shortness of life and the length of what comes after, of kindness to the poor. And there were pilgrims too, coming and going, for a town so thick with churches and holy houses, with its hospitals and its shrines, drew the devout as a lamp draws moths in the soft dark. Folk came to pray, to give thanks, to seek healing, to buy a candle and set it burning before some altar with a whispered hope. Faith was not a thing kept for Sundays and set aside the rest of the week. It was the very air of the place, in the ringing of the bells and the turning of the feasts and the friars in the street and the pilgrims on the road and the little prayers muttered over a net or a loaf for a sick child. And so we come to the end of this night's walking with the great town whole around us, and I want you to hold it now for a long quiet moment at the very top of its greatness, before ever the sea has taken so much as a single house. Here it stands, rich from its herring and its trade, free, with its charters from the king, proud, sending its members to Parliament and sealing its papers with ships, ordered by its bailiffs and its guilds, crowded with churches, cradled in bells, its year turning through feast after feast, its streets loud with markets and fairs and the preaching of friars. A complete world, a confident world, a whole and rounded and self-sure world, certain, as such places always are, as we ourselves so often are, that it would stand where it stood for all time, that its bells would ring over that shore for ever, that the tide that lapped its quays each day was its servant and its road, and never, never its enemy. And that is where I will leave it tonight, safe at its height, sure of itself, none of it knowing, none of it dreaming. For all the while, beneath the low soft cliff on which the whole bright town was built, unheard beneath the ringing of all those bells, the patient sea was already quietly at its work, as it had been for longer than the town had memory, and as it would go on being, slowly, blamelessly, without haste and without any anger at all, in the long centuries still to come. But we need not go down to the water yet. Not tonight. Tonight the town still stands, whole and warm and lit. The bells are ringing the curfew, the fires are being covered, the people are going to their beds. And you may go to yours. There is nothing to fear in any of it. You already know how the long story ends. And it ends gently, and it ends in remembering. So let the sound of those old bells fade softly down into the dark with you, and let your breath grow slow and long, and you may let your eyes close now, whenever they wish, and rest. And so we leave the city standing there at its very height, sure of itself, certain it would last, its bells still ordering the hours and its quays still crowded with the good plenty of the sea, and we turn now, softly, gently, the way you might turn a page in a book you have read many times before, to the sea itself. There is no need to brace for this part. Let your shoulders come down again, and then a little further than that, further than you think they can go, until they are resting where they truly belong. Let the jaw loosen, let the breath lengthen, all on its own, without you having to mind it. Let the bed take the whole weight of you, all of it, so that you are held and needn't hold anything yourself. For though we are turning now toward the taking of the city, remember, as we will keep remembering all through the nights to come, that this is long, long over, that it was all finished centuries before you or I or anyone we know was born, and that there is nothing in it waiting in the dark to startle you. You already know how it comes out. We are only going to watch it, very slowly, from a great and gentle distance, the way you might see a storm painted in an old dim picture on the wall of a quiet room, the storm all stilled and softened by the paint and the years, unable to reach you, unable to trouble you, no louder now than a whisper. And here is the first thing to hold, and the kindest thing, and the truest, that in this story there is no villain at all. We have had other nights, you and I, of harder tales. Tales with cruelty in them, with fire, with men who came and turned other men out of their homes for gain or for spite. And those are sorrowful in a particular sharp way, because a wrong was done, because it need not have been so, because there was a hand to blame. But there is none of that here. The sea that took Dunwich meant it no harm, for the sea means nothing at all. It has no malice in it, no anger, no plan against the town, no grudge to settle. It is only water and weather and the slow turning of the years, doing what water and weather have always done and will always do, along every shore in the world, whether anyone is watching or not. The sea did not hate Dunwich. The sea did not even know Dunwich was there. It simply kept, in its own patient way, an appointment it had never made and could not break, the long, blameless appointment of the tide with the land. And there is a peculiar rest in that, if you let yourself feel it, that this great loss had no wickedness in it, no one to forgive and no one to rage at. Only nature keeping its slow and ancient time. So let us understand the coast itself, calmly, plainly, the way you might have it explained to you by a kind old voice on a walk along the shore. The coast of Suffolk, all along that eastern edge of England where it leans out into the North Sea, is not made of hard rock. It is not cliff of granite or of good grey stone that stands for 1,000 years and shrugs at the waves. It is soft cliff of sand and of shingle and of crumbling clay, low banks heaped up long ago by ancient ice and older rivers, no more than a gentle height above the beach. It is beautiful, and it is fragile, in the way that a bank of sand is fragile, a thing you could dig with your 2 hands, a thing the rain undercuts and the frost loosens and the sea, in the end, takes as easily as you might brush crumbs from a cloth. And below that soft low cliff lies the great cold width of the North Sea, which is no small or gentle water. It is a wide, grey, restless sea, shallow and quick to anger, open all the way to the north where the great storms are born, with nothing to shelter this coast from them, nothing to break their long reach, so that when the wind swings round and drives the whole weight of that water down upon the land, there is a mighty cold power in it, patient and enormous, and entirely without hurry. And there is the drift, the endless sideways drift of the tides, which is the thing that shapes that whole shore. Along the coast the sea does not merely come in and go out, it also runs, always, in one long slow current from the north down toward the south, and it carries the sand and the shingle with it as it goes, a little at a time, grain by grain, stone by stone, forever, so the shore is never still. It is forever being eaten away in one place, and heaped up again in another, forever taking from here and giving to there. The sea unmaking one stretch of coast and building a new spit or bank a few miles down with the very same sand. It is a shore that is always moving, always being carried southward, always in the slow act of becoming something else, and a town built upon it, however great, however proud, is a town built upon a thing that will not hold still. The wonder is not that Dunwich was taken. The wonder, when you understand the coast, is that it stood so grandly for so long, that it had its centuries of greatness at all, upon such a shifting, tender edge of the world. And think, too, how quiet that work is, most of the time, how gentle, and how small, day upon day. For the sea does not take a coast all at once. In one great snatching, it takes it a grain at a time, a stone at a time, in the long dull weather between the storms. A tide comes in and licks a little clay from the foot of the cliff, and goes out again, and no one marks it. The rain seeps into the sandy bank and loosens it, and a little slides down onto the beach, and is carried off southward on the drift, and no one marks that either. A hard frost swells the water in the ground and cracks the soft cliff open, and a spring thaw sends a slow slither of earth down to the sea. It is the patientest labour in the world, and the most invisible, years of it, whole lifetimes of it, in which the town on the cliff seems to stand exactly as it always stood, unchanged, unthreatened, while all the while, unhurried and unheard, the ground is being carried out from under its far edge, a hand's breadth in a hard year, a little less in a soft one. This is the true face of the sea's taking, not the roar of the great storm which comes but rarely, but the long soft breathing of the tide, in and out, wearing the land away as gently and as ceaselessly as breathing wears away a life. And there is nothing fearful in it. It is the most natural thing there is. It is only the sea, going about the slow, blameless business of being the sea. For a long while, of course, no one troubled themselves greatly about any of this. The sea gave more than it took, in those good centuries. It gave the herring and the harbour and the wide roads of trade. It gave the town its whole life. If a little land went here and there, a strip of the low cliffs slipping down onto the beach after a hard winter, well, such things happened, and had always happened, and the town was large, and there was land enough, and the sea was the friend that had made them rich. So they lived their busy, prosperous lives above the water, and did not much look down, and the tide came and went below the cliff, twice a day, quiet and constant, keeping its appointment, biding its patient time, and you may picture it just so, and let it soothe you, the great town going about its days, all unknowing, and the grey sea at the foot of the cliff, neither cruel nor kind, only faithful, only there, doing the small ceaseless work it had been doing since before the town was ever thought of. But the sea has its greater days, as well as its small ones, and the first of the true warnings came in the year 1286. In that year a great storm rose up out of the North Sea and fell upon the coast, and the water came higher than the townsfolk had known it come, a surge, a swelling of the whole sea driven up by the wind, so that it climbed the low cliff and reached into the edges of the town, and tore away land and houses that had stood as if they would stand forever. It was a hard blow, and it frightened them, and it did real hurt to the town's edge. And yet, when it had passed and the sea had drawn back down to its old quiet murmur, they gathered themselves and mended what they could, and went on, as people do, telling themselves that such a storm was a rare and evil chance, the like of which they might not see again in a lifetime. They saw its like within 2 years, for in December of the very next year but one, in 1287, in the dark heart of the winter, there came a far greater storm, one so great that it is remembered by its own name in the old accounts of many lands along that whole northern sea. They called it the flood of St. Lucia, for it fell near her feast day in the middle of December, when the year is at its shortest and darkest. And it was a vast and terrible sea, driven by a wild wind that rose against the whole of that low coast in a single night, and against Dunwich it came in earnest. The water climbed and came into the town, and when at last it drew away, it had carried off a great swathe of the shore. Houses and lanes and good ground gone down into the sea in one dark December night, gone as if they had never stood there at all. Now hold this softly, for I will tell it always at a distance, and it is all so very long ago. Picture it, if you picture it at all, the way you would see it in that old dim painting, the far small town on its cliff, the great grey sweep of the storm, the lantern light guttering in the wind, and all of it stilled and quieted by the paint and by the 700 years that lie between that night and this warm bed of yours. Whatever fear there was that night is a fear long, long since ended. Everyone who felt it has been at rest these many centuries, their fright over almost as soon as it was felt. A single winter's night far back at the very edge of memory. There is nothing sharp in it now for you to hold. There is only the fact of it, gone soft and grey and gentle with time, that the sea one December came up and took a piece of Dunwich, and drew back, and left the town standing but wounded, and a little smaller than it had been. And that truly is what those two storms were. Not the end, not by centuries, but the first true warning. For before that night men might have told themselves that the sea was a friend that now and then grew rough, as friends do, and meant nothing by it. But after the flood of St. Lucia it was harder to say so. Something had changed, or rather something had shown itself that had been there all along, unhurried, unnoticed, beneath the very cliff on which they had built their greatness. The sea, it seemed, meant in the end to have the town. Not tonight, and not tomorrow, and not in any year a living man could point to, but in the fullness of a time so long that only the sea itself could keep it. The patient water meant to take back the low soft ground that Dunwich stood upon, and to fold the great city, quietly, into itself. They could not have known how long it would take. They could not have guessed that the sea would be at this work for the better part of 700 years, taking a lane here and a churchyard there, a street in one lifetime, and a spire in the next. So slowly that most who lived and died in the town would see only a little of it, only their own small share of the loss. From where we stand, looking back down the long calm corridor of the years, we can see the whole of it, the whole slow shape of the taking, laid out and finished, and safe. And so there is nothing here to dread. The warning has been given, the first blows struck and long ago mended and long ago forgotten, and the sea has settled back to its old quiet murmur below the cliff, biding its time as it has always bided it, in no hurry, keeping its slow appointment, meaning no harm and doing what it does. So let the storm in the painting grow still. Let the grey water lie down again along the foot of the low soft cliff. There is nothing more that will happen tonight, nothing that has not already happened and long since passed away into the deep quiet of the past. The town is standing yet, a little smaller, a little wiser about its sea, and the greater part of its story is still before it. The wounds and the long, slow taking that we will come to on the nights ahead, all of it held safe, all of it gentle, all of it over and done these many 100 years. You need carry none of it. You need only lie here and be held, and breathe, and let the tide go out and in, far away and long ago, below a cliff that is already gone. Let your shoulders come down once more, and a little further than that. Let the breath go long and slow, like the slow drawing back of a quiet sea. And you may let your eyes close now, whenever they wish, and rest, for the sea is patient, and the night is long. And all of this, all of it, was over and safe before ever you were born. And so we come, softly, to the two great wounds, and before we speak of them at all, let us settle you a little deeper into the warmth where you already lie. Let your shoulders come down, and then a little further than that. Let the jaw loosen, let the tongue rest easy behind the teeth, let the breath lengthen without your having to lengthen it, and let the bed take the whole weight of you, as the sea takes the weight of a boat that has stopped rowing against it. There is nothing here to brace against tonight. We are going to speak of storms, yes, of a night of shingle and a night of high water, some 700 years ago and more, but we are going to speak of them the way you might see them in an old dim painting hung far across a quiet room, all the fury of them gone still and small and safe behind the varnish, all the noise of them long since faded into the hush of years. You already know how it comes out. You have known since the first night. The city is gone now, gently gone, and richly remembered, and nothing in this chapter can startle you, because everything in this chapter is already, and forever, over. Hold that, as we turn the years back to the first of the wounds, to the year 1328, and to a single night of storm. You will remember the coast we drew, the low soft cliff of sand and shingle, and you will remember most of all the harbour, the great harbour at the mouth of the Dunwich River, one of the finest on the whole east coast of England. The deep sheltered water into which the herring fleets came home each autumn, silver heavy, the water that carried the wool out and the wine and timber in, the water that was, truly, the living heart of the town. A port, you see, is not really its streets, nor even its churches. For all their spires, a port is its harbour. The harbour is the reason the town is there at all. Take a great city and set it a mile inland from any water, and it withers, but let it keep its harbour, and it may lose half its houses and rebuild them all within a lifetime. The harbour was the blood of Dunwich. And on a night in the year 1328, gently, patiently, without any malice at all, the sea reached in and stopped the blood. It did not do it with drama. That is the strange, quiet cruelty of it, that there was almost nothing to see. There was a storm, one of the great storms that come down the North Sea out of the north and east, and pile the water against this shore, and the storm, as storms on that coast had always done, took up the loose shingle, the endless drift of pebbles that the tides forever carry down along the beach, and it drove that shingle, a whole long bank of it, straight across the mouth of the harbour. And there it stayed. When the wind at last dropped and the grey morning came, and the townsfolk went down to look, the way in from the sea was choked. The fine deep entrance that their fathers and their fathers' fathers had sailed through was silted and barred, a bank of stones lying across the throat of the port where the open water used to be. Feel how quiet a disaster that is. No houses fell that night. No lives, so far as the old accounts tell, were lost. Come the daylight, the town stood just as it had stood, the marketplace, the many churches, the crowded timber roofs, all whole, all there. And yet the wound was mortal, and the wiser among the burgesses must have known it standing on the beach that very morning, looking at a ridge of pebbles. For the river behind the town, the Dunwich River, the Blythe, still had to reach the sea somehow. Water always finds its way, and with its old mouth barred it turned, and went seeking another. It found its way out to the north, past the town, toward the little places of Walberswick and Southwold up the coast, and there it made itself a new mouth, and there, slowly, the trade began to follow it. For the ships must go where the deep water is. If the deep water is now at Walberswick, then to Walberswick the ships will go, and to Southwold, and the herring and the wool and the wine will go with them, and the merchant's silver with that. So it was not a blow that felled the town in a night. It was slower and sadder than that. It was a wound that bled for 100 years. From that storm onward the harbour of Dunwich was never truly whole again. The townsfolk fought it, dug at it, tried to hold their channel open against the endless patient shingle, and for a while they held some part of it. But the sea had the longer patience, as the sea always does, and year by year the great port's traffic thinned, and its wealth drained quietly away to the north, and the confidence of the place, that certainty we walked among when the town stood at its height, began, without anyone quite naming the day, to fade. A port robbed of its harbour is a heart robbed of its blood. From that night in 1328, the greatness of Dunwich was gently going out. And you can imagine, softly, how it must have gone in those years, for it is the way of people to fight for the thing they love, and the townsfolk of Dunwich did fight in the patient, practical way of working men. They took their boats and their spades to the choked mouth and laboured to cut the channel open again. They raised what money the borough could raise and gave it to the digging. And there were seasons, the old accounts tell, when they won a little water back, and a ship or two came through as ships had always come, and hope must have risen with the tide. But the shingle never rested. Every storm that blew brought more of it drifting down the beach to lie across their labour, filling in by night what they had opened by day, and no borough, however proud, however rich in charters and burgesses and bells, could outweight the whole long drift of the North Sea. It is no shame to them that they lost. There is no losing to a thing so patient and so blameless. There is only, in the end, the letting go. And bit by bit, without any single day you could mark on a calendar, the ships stopped trying, and went north to the deep clear water at Walberswick and Southwold, and the quays of Dunwich stood a little emptier each year, and the tar and the salt and the shouting of a great port thinned to something quieter, and then quieter still. And still, hear this, and let it loosen your shoulders again, still there was no villain in it. No enemy had come. No one had set a torch to a roof or turned a family out of a door. It was only the sea, doing in one night what the sea is always, everywhere, patiently doing, moving the stones from here to there, seeking the low way, keeping its long and blameless appointment. There is a kind of peace to be had in that, even now, even in the sorrow of it, that this was nobody's wickedness, only the slow turning of the world. Let that peace be under you like the mattress is under you. All of it is centuries done. Now let the years run softly on, a generation, and then another, the harbour bleeding quietly north, the town a little smaller and a little quieter than the great city of its height, but still a town, still full of bells and roofs and people, still Dunwich. And then, on a night in January in the year 1362, the sea came a second time, and this time it came not to choke, but to take. They gave that storm a name out of the old Low German of the lands across the water, the Netherlanders and the Frisians and the Danes whose own low coasts it drowned that same terrible night. They called it the Grote Mandrenki. It means the great drowning of men. Say it softly to yourself and let it go, the great drowning of men. It was one of the vast storms of that whole age, a storm that swept the length of the North Sea and battered every shore it touched. And here on the Suffolk coast, against the soft low cliff of Dunwich, it rose up out of the dark and, in a single night, tore away a great swathe of the town. We will tell it gently, at the distance of the old dim painting, for there is no need, none at all, to go close. Picture it, if you must picture it, only as a wide dark canvas seen from far off, the black weight of the water lifting against a black sky, the pale broken line of the surf climbing higher up the sand than it had ever climbed, the low cliff giving way not stone by stone now but in long soft falls, whole faces of it sliding down into the churning dark, and lanes of houses, hundreds of houses by the old reckoning, and churches too, going down with the land into the sea in the space of that one night. When the morning came, a great part of the town that had stood at dusk was simply not there. Where there had been streets there was open water. Where there had been the sound of the town there was the sound of the sea. And yet, even here, even in the very heart of the wound, keep hold of the thing that makes this a story you can rest inside. It is long, long over. That night ended, as all nights end. The morning came, grey and exhausted and calm, and the sea drew back, and the people who remained walked down and looked, the way people have always walked down and looked, and then they did the thing that people do, they went on. They mended what could be mended, they mourned what was gone, they moved their thresholds a little further back from the edge, and they lived. The town did not vanish in that night, for all the swathe the sea had taken. Much of it still stood, churches still lifted their spires, the market still kept its days, the bells still rang the hours over the roofs that were left. Dunwich after 1362 was a wounded city, mortally wounded, we may fairly say now, looking back with all the years to help us, but it was still a city, and it did not know that morning that it was dying. It only knew that the sea had taken a great deal and that it had survived. That is the true shape of it, and it is a merciful shape. These 2 nights, the shingle of 1328 and the drowning of 1362, were not the end of Dunwich. They were the turning of it. Before them, for all its long antiquity, the town's whole story had been arising, the bishopric coming, the harbour filling, the churches multiplying, the wealth and the charters and the pride, all gathering upward toward that confident height where we lately stood. After them, the story is a long, slow, gentle coming down. Not a fall. A fall is too quick a word, too loud a word, for what happened to Dunwich. It was a settling, a subsiding, a great tired thing lying slowly down. And it would take not another night, but another 500 years and more for the sea to finish, so patiently, what those 2 storms began. So do not carry these storms into your sleep as fearful things. Carry them the way you would carry the memory of weather from your own childhood, a great storm you once heard from a warm bed, the wind loud in the chimney, the window rattling, and you safe under the blankets, listening, unafraid, because someone you trusted had already told you that the house would stand and the morning would come. That is exactly where you are tonight. The house has already stood. The morning has already come and gone, and come and gone again, 600 and more times over since the last of these nights. Everyone who woke to that grey exhausted dawn has been long at rest. The fear is all spent. Only the story is left, and the story is soft in the hand now, worn smooth as a beach stone by all the years that have rolled it over and over. There is even, if you listen for it, a tenderness in what these storms could not do. They took the harbour's mouth and they took a great swathe of streets, but they could not take the whole town at a blow, and so the town had time. Time to keep living, generation after generation, on its shrinking cliff. Time to ring its bells and hold its markets, and christen its children and bury its dead for centuries yet. The sea, even at its two most terrible, was in no hurry. It never was on that coast. It took, and then it waited, and then it took a little more, and always it left enough for the people to go on loving the place while it lasted. There is a strange kindness in a slow ending, a kindness a sudden one never has. Dunwich was given the long goodbye, and every year of that long goodbye is a year the town was still alive, still cherished, still home. Let that be the last thought I set beside you as this night's chapter closes. Two storms, far away and long ago, seemed dim and small across the quiet room of the years, a night of shingle that turned the river north, and a night of high water they called the great drowning of men, and both of them over before your grandparents' were born. Both of them held now safely inside the telling, unable to reach you, unable to startle you, unable to do anything at all but be remembered, gently, by you here in the warm. The great city is wounded now, in our story, and its long quiet lying down has begun. But you already know it comes to rest kindly at the end, and is not lost, and is honoured still. And you may rest kindly too. Let your shoulders come down once more, and a little further than that. Let the breath lengthen. Let the bed hold you the way the calm sea holds the boat that has stopped rowing. You may let your eyes close now, whenever they wish, and drift, while the tide breathes slow and blameless on a shore that means you no harm at all. So let the great storms fall quiet behind us now, the way thunder rolls away over the far edge of the sea and leaves the air washed and still, and let your own breath lengthen out to meet that stillness. Let your shoulders come down, and then a little further than that, further than you think they can go, and let the pillow take the whole weight of your head, so that your neck need do nothing at all. There is nothing more to brace against tonight. The worst of the sea's blows are already behind us in the telling, and everything that follows now is slow and soft and unhurried, and it happened so very long ago that not one grain of it can reach into this room. You may simply lie here and let the story move past you, the way you might watch the tide come in from a warm window, feeling no need to do anything but breathe and rest and listen. For what comes now is not another storm. The great mortal wounds were struck, and struck quickly, in single terrible nights that are long over. But the true taking of Dunwich was not a matter of nights at all. It was a matter of centuries. It was the long, slow, patient taking, the sea coming back, season upon season, year upon year, lifetime upon lifetime, to gather in a little more of the land. The way a tide comes up a beach, not in one great rush, but in 100 small advances, each wave reaching a hand's breadth further than the last, until at length the whole sand is covered, and you can scarcely say when it happened. This is the tender heart of the whole story, and it is the gentlest part of it, because there is nothing sudden here to startle you, only the soft and blameless arithmetic of the years, each one carrying away a little more, so quietly that a person might live a long life in the town, and see the sea move only a field's width in all that time, and think it slow. And it was slow. It was the slowest ending a great city was ever given. Picture it then, not as catastrophe, but as a long withdrawing, told at the distance of an old dim painting, all its edges soft. After the great drowning, the city did not fall silent all at once. It went on. The bells still rang over the streets that were left. The market still opened. The fishing boats still went out on the autumn herring and came back low in the water. The friars still preached, and the burgesses still met, and children were still born in the timber houses and grew up thinking the town eternal. But now the sea had the taste of it, and would not let it go, and so it came back, and came back, and came back. A winter storm would gnaw away a length of the low cliff, and a lane that had run along the cliff top since anyone could remember would find its seaward houses standing suddenly at the very brink, their gardens gone, their doorsteps hanging over air, and the people who lived in them would gather what they could and move inland a street and build again and go on, and the sea would wait, patient as ever, and in a generation or two it would come for that street as well. This is how a whole city is taken by inches, not in terror, but in a long, quiet giving of ground. Each generation that lived at Dunwich learned the same slow grief and made the same slow peace with it. The knowledge that the lane where you were born might not be there for your grandchildren, that the churchyard where your father lay might one day slip, gravestone by gravestone, over the edge and down into the grey water, and that this was simply the way of things on that shore, no one's fault and no one's cruelty, only the sea keeping its long appointment. There is something almost tender in it, when you hold it softly and from a great distance, a town that did not rage against its ending, because its ending came so slowly that it became a part of ordinary life, as familiar and as unremarkable as the turning of the year. Think, if you like, of what it was to grow old in such a place, and think of it kindly, from far off, as a thing long finished and gentle to hold. A man born in one of those cliff-top houses in his boyhood might have played in a lane, and courted in a doorway, and walked to a church, all of which stood, in his day, a good stone's throw from the edge, and by the time his hair was white and his grandchildren were about his knees, that same lane and that same doorway and perhaps that same church might be gone, out under the water, and the edge of the land drawn back nearly to his own garden gate. He would have watched it come, slowly, all his life, not as a sudden fright, but as a familiar neighbour, the sea, that everyone in Dunwich lived beside and reckoned with, the way people who live beneath a mountain reckon with its weather. And when at last his own street's turn drew near, he and his would gather their goods onto a cart, and take down the good timbers of the house to build again a little inland, and move, as their forebears had moved, and their children would move after them, one street back from the sea, and go on with the ordinary business of living. There was no panic in it. There was only the slow, patient shuffle of a whole town retreating from the water across the long centuries, a step at a time, so gradual that no single soul ever had to flee, but only, in the end, to move house once or twice in a lifetime, as people do. And so let that thought settle you rather than stir you, for it is a settling thought, that even the losing of a city can be borne so gently, so gradually, that it becomes only the rhythm of ordinary days. Let your breath lengthen on it. Let the warmth gather under the blankets around you. Feel how the whole of your body has grown a little heavier and a little softer where it meets the bed, and let it grow heavier still. There is nowhere you must go and nothing you must carry. The town moves slowly inland across the years, and you lie still and warm and watch it go, from a great and peaceful distance, and one by one, across some 300 years, the great churches went. Remember how many there were when we walked the city at its height, that whole skyline of towers standing over the sea, St. John the Baptist the greatest of them, and with it St. Leonard, St. Martin, St. Nicholas, St. Peter, all saints, St. Michael, and the friaries beyond. Hold that skyline in your mind, and now watch it, very gently, begin to thin. For as the cliff crept inland, it came at last to the foot of one church, and then another, and each one, when its time came, was quietly abandoned to the sea, the roof stripped for its lead and timber, the bells taken down and carried inland or sold away, the graves left where they lay, and the empty shell allowed to stand on the crumbling edge until, in its own season, it too went over. Each fall was a milestone in the long decline, and each one was mourned, and each one, in time, was made peace with, because there was nothing else to be done. The old accounts tell that St. Michael's and St. Leonard's and St. Martin's and St. Nicholas were among the early ones to go. In the 14th and 15th centuries, in the long aftermath of the great drownings, the smaller and the seaward first, standing nearest the hungry edge, taken while the memory of the storms was still fresh. No one can now say the exact year of each, and the scholars still gently argue the order of them, but that hardly matters to us tonight. What matters is the shape of it, the slow subtraction, one steeple at a time removed from that crowded sky, until the town that had been famous through all of England for its multitude of churches had a little fewer to ring, and then fewer still, and with each one lost, a parish emptied, and its people folded into the parishes that remained, and the living town drew back from the sea's edge like a tide going out, leaving the churchyards behind it, out on the crumbling margin, keeping their patient watch above the waves. Then, in the middle of the 1500s, the greatest of them all was lost, St. John the Baptist, the finest and largest of the parish churches, the one whose tower had stood highest over the marketplace, the church that had been the very heart of the town's pride. It is said its stones were taken down before the sea could have them, sold and carried off and built into other walls in other places, so that something of Dunwich went on living quietly in the fabric of inland farms and houses, as scattered stone often does. And that is a gentle thought to keep, that even the greatest of the drowned churches did not wholly vanish, but was in part carried up out of the sea's reach, and given a second, humbler life, holding up someone's barn or garden wall to this very day, unknown and unremarked. The heart of the old city was gone from its place, but even in going, a little of it was saved, and it was not the parish churches alone that the sea gathered in, across those long years. The great religious houses went too, in their own slow season, the Blackfriars, the Dominican house, given up as the ground failed beneath it, the preceptory of the Templars, long since passed away, the hospitals, the leper house of St. James and the Maison Dieu, that had sheltered the sick and the poor of the town in its prosperous days, all in time abandoned as the living town drew back and could no longer keep them. Only the Grey Friars, the house of the Franciscan friars, stood on ground far enough back and high enough up that it outlasted nearly all the rest, and something of it stands even yet, but that too is for another night. One by one, gently, the great institutions of a great city were laid down, not thrown down, and the sea took the emptied ground when the people had done with it, and the wide grey water closed over the place where they had been. And still the town went on, smaller now and humbler, but living. The centuries turned. The Tudors gave way to the Stuarts, kings came and went far off in London, and all the while the sea came in, and came in, and came in, a field in a lifetime, a lane in a generation, and Dunwich grew quietly smaller under the wide East Anglian sky. By the 1600s it was no longer any kind of great city at all, only a modest place, a shadow of itself, a scattering of houses and a church or two on a cliff above the ruins of its own greatness, with the drowned streets lying out under the water and the fishermen sometimes, it was said, snagging their nets on the tops of things that had once been walls. The proud borough still, remarkably, sent its members to Parliament, long after the town had shrunk almost to nothing, a strange and rather touching persistence, the old forms of greatness outliving the greatness itself, like a grand coat worn thin, but still worn. And in the early 1700s, another of the last churches went, St. Peter's, one of the very few still standing, given up at last to the advancing edge, its bells and its lead and its stone taken away before the cliff took the rest. And now, of all that crowded skyline of towers that had once stood over the busy quays, of St. John and St. Leonard and St. Martin and St. Nicholas and St. Michael and St. Peter and the rest, there was left, in the end, only one. only All Saints out on the northern edge of what remained, keeping the last watch of all the churches of Dunwich above the sea. But that is a chapter for another night, and a tender one, and we will come to it gently when we come to it, and you need not reach toward it now. For tonight, only rest in the long slow shape of it, the 300 years and more of quiet withdrawal, the city dying by inches so softly that it hardly ever cried out, each generation losing another lane to the water, and each generation making its peace and going on. There is a poignancy in it that moves the heart, but it is a poignancy without terror, without cruelty, without any villain at all, only the sea being the sea, and the years being the years, and a proud old town growing gently smaller and quieter under the wide grey sky, until it was, at the last, no city and no great town, but only a hamlet on a low cliff, a handful of houses where a metropolis had been. And even that, even the losing of a whole city, was in its way a gentle thing, because it was so slow, and so long ago, and so entirely finished, and because nothing in it can reach you here, and you already know how it comes out. So let the centuries go by you now the way clouds go by a window, unhurried, one and then another, asking nothing of you. Let your jaw loosen, and your tongue rest soft in your mouth, and the small muscles round your eyes let go. Let the breath come and go of its own accord, slow and deep and easy, and let the bed hold all of you, from your heels to the crown of your head, so that you need carry nothing, not even the weight of your own limbs. The town is drawing quietly back from the sea, street by street, and it is a long, long way off, and it is all over now, and it is safe, and you may simply lie here in the warm dark and let it recede. There is one church left on the cliff, keeping its watch for us, and there is a legend waiting, soft as bells over water, for the next of these nights. But nothing is waiting to startle you. Nothing at all. Only the slow tide of the years, going out and out and out, carrying the great city gently down beneath the waves, and you, held safe and warm and still, may let your eyes close now whenever they wish, and rest. And so we come, softly and without any hurry, to the last of them, the last church of all that great city of churches, standing alone at the very end. There is no need to brace yourself for it. You already know how it comes out. You have known since the very first night. It is all long over, and gently over, and safe to hold. So before we go on, let your shoulders come down once more, down, and then a little further than that, further than you think they can go, and let the jaw loosen, and let the breath lengthen all on its own, slow and easy, and let the bed take the whole of your weight, so that you are held and carried, and asked to do nothing at all but listen. Good. That is all this last chapter but one asks of you, that you lie still, and let the story come to you, the way the tide comes in over the flat wet sand, without effort, without alarm, one quiet reach after another. We had watched the churches go, over some 300 slow years, St. Nicholas, St. Martin, St. Leonard, and the great St. John the Baptist, and then St. Peter, one after another, each a quiet milestone in the long taking. And at the end of that long procession, when all the others had gone down to the sea, there remained one church still standing on the cliff. It was called All Saints, a fitting name, you might think, for the last of so many, as though it stood in for all the rest, keeping the memory of the whole city in its single grey shape against the sky. All Saints was by then an old and weathered thing, a medieval church of flint and stone, its square tower rising above the low crumbling edge of the land, and for a long, long while. Through the 17th century, and the 18th, and on into the 19th, it kept its lonely watch there, the last of Dunwich's many towers still lifted toward the clouds. But you must understand what kind of watch it kept, in those last centuries, because it is a tender thing. By then the town it had been built to serve was mostly gone beneath the waves, or shrunk away to the little scatter of houses inland. The congregation dwindled, year by year, until there were too few souls left to fill the pews, and too little money to keep the roof sound against the Suffolk weather. And so in time the services ceased, and the roof went, and All Saints stood open to the sky, roofless, its windows empty, grass growing along the tops of its walls, the wind moving through where the singing used to be. A ruin, but a beloved ruin, a church that had outlived its town, and now simply stood, patient and grey, on the edge of the land, waiting its turn with the same slow dignity the whole story has had from the first. And here is a gentle thing, a thing that draws the heart. In those last years, All Saints on its cliff became famous, not for grandeur, for it was only a modest ruin by then, but for its meaning and for its situation. The 19th century was the age when photography was newly come into the world, and painters and poets and travellers with their cameras made their way to that lonely shore to see it and to set it down before it was gone. They photographed the roofless church against the wide pale sky, they painted it in soft washes of grey and gold, they wrote of it in their letters and their journals, as a place that stirred something in them, the last standing stone of a drowned city, the final witness. So we are lucky tonight in a small and quiet way, because those gentle travellers came and looked and remembered. We still have their pictures, and through them we can still see All Saints as it was, standing there on the brink, and we do not have to imagine it only. It was seen and loved and kept even in its passing. The sea, of course, came on. It had never stopped, it never hurried, and it never stopped, and that is the whole nature of it. Slowly, over the last of those years, the cliff edge crept nearer and nearer to the west wall of All Saints, and then to the walls themselves, so that the church stood at the very margin of the land, half over the sea, one field of air and one long drop between it and the water below. The buttresses, those great sloping supports of stone that lean against a church's walls to hold them up, began, one by one, to lose the ground from beneath them, and to lean out, and to fall. Piece by piece the old ruin gave itself to the sea, the way the whole city had given itself, gently, without protest, a little each year. And at last, around the year 1919, within the memory, that is, of people whose grandchildren may be alive yet, so near to us is the end of this ancient tale. The last of the Tower of All Saints leaned out over the water and went down into the sea. The final standing stone of medieval Dunwich, the last of all those many towers that had once made the city's skyline over the herring boats, came quietly to rest beneath the waves with all its brothers. And so the visible city was gone, whole and entire, back into the grey water it had risen beside 1,000 years before. There is no horror in it, none at all. It is more like the closing of a very old door, softly, by a hand that means no harm, the last light in the last window put gently out, and the long night of the sea come down over the whole of it at last. But even then, and this is the thread of tenderness that runs all through this story, the thing that keeps memory alive against the water, even then the people would not let it be wholly lost. Before the tower fell, or in the falling, a single buttress of All Saints was saved. Loving hands took that one piece of the last church, that one weathered wedge of medieval stone, and carried it inland, away from the hungry edge, to the churchyard of St. James, the present church of Dunwich, built in the 19th century, safe on its ground well back from the sea. And there that buttress stands to this day, reset upright in the quiet grass, a single stone of the drowned city keeping its place on dry land, the last relic of All Saints, rescued and honoured, so that you might go and lay your own hand upon it, even now, and touch the very last of great Dunwich that men could carry to safety. One stone, kept. It is a small thing, and it is everything, for it says, plainly and without a word, that a place is not simply surrendered while there is a single soul who loves it enough to carry a piece of it home. There is one more image from that crumbling edge that people have never been able to forget, and it is worth dwelling on, softly, because it holds the whole feeling of the thing. All around the old churches, as churchyards do, lay the graves of the townsfolk, the fishermen and the merchants and the burgesses and their wives and children, generation upon generation, laid to rest in the ground of their own city. And as the cliff wore away, the churchyards wore away with it, so that in the last years the graves themselves came to the very lip of the land. There are old photographs, and this is one of the most tender things in the whole story, of the last gravestones standing right at the crumbling edge, leaning a little. The earth gone soft and open beneath them, keeping their patient watch out over the water that was coming, at last to take them too. One of these, the most famous of all, bore the name of a man called Jacob Forster, his headstone standing alone at the brink for years, near the very last, a single stone marker against the sea and the sky. As though he had been left to keep the final vigil for the whole vanished city. There is no dread in that picture, only a great and gentle poignancy. He rests, the stone stood its watch. And in time the sea took that too, quietly, as it took everything, and it is all long over now, and all at peace. And now we come to the very heart of it, to the legend that gives this whole night its name, the softest and most beautiful of all the things that are told of Dunwich. It is a legend, mind, not a fact, and I will not pretend it to you as a fact, for it is far too lovely to need dressing up as anything but what it is. But it is a legend the whole coast has cherished for as long as anyone can remember, and it goes like this. They say, the old accounts tell it, and the fishermen told it, and the folk of Walberswick and Southwold have told it down the years, that on certain nights, on wild and stormy nights when the wind is up and the sea is running high over the drowned streets, if you stand quiet on the shore at Dunwich, you may hear, faint and far away, and coming up from beneath the very waves, the sound of church bells ringing. The bells of the drowned churches, the bells of St. John the Baptist and St. Peter and St. Nicholas and All Saints and all the rest, the bells that once rang out over the herring fleets and ordered the hours of every day in the great town, still swinging, so the legend says, in their fallen towers on the seabed, still tolling, softly, out under the water. So that on a storm-tossed night their voices come drifting up through the deep and along the wind to any ear that is listening. It is the sort of tale that seems to have grown up all on its own, the way sea mist grows up along a shore at dusk, so that no one can now say who first told it, or when, only that it has been told for a very long while, passed from the old folk to the young along that coast, mother to child and fisherman to fisherman, until it belongs to the place itself as much as the shingle and the wind do. And it is a kind thing to notice that the people did not make of their drowned city a tale of terror. As they so easily might have done, they did not people the dark water with monsters or with wrath. They gave it bells instead. Of all the sounds they might have imagined coming up out of the deep, they chose the gentlest and the most homely, the very bells that had called their forefathers to prayer, and to market, and to rest, as though the town below were not lost at all, but only gone on ringing its own quiet hours, on and on, beneath the waves, keeping faith with the living from under the sea. That is the tale, and whether you hear the wind, or the working of the waves among the old stones far below, or something the heart supplies out of its own longing, no one can say, and it does not much matter, for it is one of the tenderest legends in all of England, and it means something true even if it is not a thing you could ever prove. It means that the city is not silent. It means that even drowned, even 7 centuries under the grey North Sea, Dunwich still has a voice, a gentle ghost voice, ringing softly up out of the water on the wild nights, as if to say, we are still here, we were real, we were loved, do not forget us. That is what the bells beneath the waves are truly saying. Not a warning, not a haunting to trouble your rest, only a memory, given the sound of bells, so that the lost city might go on speaking, softly to any who care to listen. And you may listen for them now if you like, here in the warm dark, drifting towards sleep, not with any fear, for there is nothing in this whole story to fear, and everything in it is long, long over and softly held. You may simply let the imagined sound of those far down bells come to you, faint and slow and low and kind, rising and falling with a swell you cannot see, rolling in from the drowned towers on the seabed, patient as the tide. One deep gentle note, and then another, spacing themselves out across the dark like the slow, slow beat of your own quiet breath. There is nothing to answer, nothing to do, nothing waiting to startle you, only the bells, ringing themselves softly out beneath the waves, and you, lying warm and heavy and safe, held by the bed, carried on the sound. So let your shoulders come down that last small distance once again, and let the breath go long, and let the imagined bells keep their slow time for you in the deep. All Saints is gone, and its one saved stone stands quiet in the grass at St. James's, and Jacob Forster keeps his rest, and the whole grey city lies gently on the floor of the sea, and still, on the stormy nights, they say the bells go on ringing, tender and unhurried, up through the dark water and along the wind. You may let your eyes close now, whenever they wish, and simply lie and listen to them. And in the last night to come, we will follow that ringing home at last, into our own quiet day, and see how the drowned city is found and kept, and honoured still, but that is for later, and there is no need to reach for it. For now there is only the sound of the bells, bells beneath the waves, and the long, slow breath, and the good dark, and rest. And so we come home, at the last, out of the deep water and the deep centuries, back to the quiet shore where we began, and there is nothing more to fear now, and nothing more to lose, for the whole long tale is told, and every storm in it is spent. So before we walk the last little way together, let your shoulders come down once more, and then a little further than that, further than seems quite possible, as though some kind hand had rested there and eased them gently down. Let the jaw loosen, so the teeth are not touching. Let the breath lengthen, without your minding it, the way the tide lengthens as it turns. Let the bed take your weight, the whole of it, the heels and the hips and the shoulders and the slow heavy head, until you are held as the old cliff was held, and you need carry nothing at all. You already know how this story ends. You have known it since the very first night. The great city was taken by the patient sea slowly over the better part of 700 years, and it was taken gently, without cruelty, and it is not gone, for here we are, still speaking of it, still keeping it, and that is the whole of the mending we came for. So let us stand in the drowsy imagination on the low green cliff at Dunwich as it is today, not the great town of spires and quays, which is all beneath the water now, but the little that remains above it, the tiny surviving hamlet, a scatter of houses and a lane, an inn, a small church, a few souls where once there were thousands. It is a peaceful place, and a kind one. The wind comes soft off the North Sea, and the grasses lean with it, and the gulls turn their slow white circles overhead. Down at the foot of the cliff the shingle beach runs long and grey and gleaming, the same patient shingle that the sea has carried here from somewhere, and will carry on to somewhere else. For the sea has never once stopped its quiet work, and never will. On a mild day the little boats are drawn up on the stones, and there is a hut where they sell the fish freshly caught, the last small echo of that great herring trade that once made the town rich beyond telling, and people come to walk the beach and gather nothing more than a stone or two, and to look out at the flat grey water and wonder, as you have wondered, at all that lies beneath it. But there is no dread in it now. The taking is long finished. What the sea meant to have, it has, and what is left it leaves, a hushed and gentle margin of England where a great city used to be, and where now there is only the wide sky, and the birds, and the sound of the water on the stones. Look inland a little, to the low green rise behind the hamlet, and you will see them still standing, the ruins of Greyfriars, the old Franciscan friary, its broken flint walls and its 2 ruined gateways open to the sky. The friars, you remember, were the grey-robed brothers who preached in the streets of the great town and tended its poor, and this house of theirs was built, in its later years, set back from the cliff, on higher and safer ground, and because of that, because it stood a little further from the sea's reach, it has outlasted very nearly everything else. It is roofless now, and green things grow along the tops of its walls, and the wind goes through the empty windows where once there was glass and candlelight and the low murmur of prayer. But it stands. Of all that great city of churches and friaries and hospitals, of all those bells and spires that once crowded the cliff, this is the one considerable ruin the sea never reached, the grey friars keeping their long vigil still, on their green hill above the drowned town, as though someone were left to remember after all. You may walk among those walls today, in the real world, and lay your hand upon the old cold flint, and it is a tender thing to do, and a restful one, for the friary keeps a kind of watch over the water that covers all the rest. And close by, in the hamlet, there is a small and much-loved keeping place, the Dunwich Museum, only a little building, tended for many years by local people who love this story and will not let it be forgotten. Inside, in its quiet rooms, the whole long tale is gathered up and held, old maps of the vanished streets, and a model of the great medieval city as it once stood. Whole, with all its churches marked, and coins, and pottery, and fragments the sea has given back, and pictures of all saints on its crumbling cliff before it fell. Here you may stand, in the warm and the dry, and look upon the drowned city laid out small and safe before you, and understand in a single glance what the water took, the market and the quays, the parish churches each in its place, St. John the Baptist the greatest, and St. Leonard and St. Martin and St. Nicholas and St. Peter and all saints, and the Greyfriars and the Blackfriars, and the harbour full of ships. It is all there kept, in that little room, the way a beloved thing is kept in a household long after the one who owned it is gone. And that, you understand, is a kind of victory over the sea, a soft one, a human one, for the water may have the stones, but it cannot have the memory, and the memory is here, tended and lit and open to any who come. Widen your gaze now, along the whole gentle coast, and see what this shore has become. To the south lies Minsmere, where the reed beds and the pools and the shingle are a great reserve for birds, tended by the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, the RSPB, a place where avocets wade and marsh harriers turn on their long slow wings and the bittern booms unseen among the reeds. And behind the cliff spreads Dunwich Heath, that soft purple and gold heathland the old folk called the Sandlings, the sandy heaths of this coast, kept now by the National Trust, all heather and gorse and the cries of birds, running down toward the sea. Where once there was a crowded, striving, wealthy city, there is now a quiet, wild place, treasured and protected, given over to the birds and the heather and the walkers who come for the peace of it. And there is something deeply restful in that turn, is there not, that the sea, having taken the great town, has left behind not a ruin to grieve over, but a gentleness. A coast of birdsong and sea lavender and long grey light, one of the calmest and most beloved corners of all England. The city gave way, the wild came back, and it is well. But now let me tell you the last wonder, the one that comes almost in our own time, and it is a happy one. For a great town does not have to stay lost forever, even when it lies beneath the sea. In the years from 2008 to 2013, a patient work was carried out along this coast, an underwater survey led by a scholar named Professor David Sear of the University of Southampton and paid for by English Heritage, whose care it is to keep the old places of the land. They went out in boats over the drowned city, over the very water that covers the market and the churches and the quays, and they let down into the dark sea not divers, for the water there is too clouded and dim to see through, but sound, beams of sound. Sent down to the seabed and returned, the way a bat finds its way in the dark, so that by listening to the echoes they could draw a picture of what lay below. Sonar, this is called, a mapping by sound. And out of that patient listening, night after night over those years, there rose again upon their charts the shape of the lost city, the run of its streets, the sites of its churches, the ruins lying tumbled and scattered on the floor of the sea, just where the old accounts had always said they were. They found the church sites, they mapped the streets, they gave the drowned town its plan again, drawn not on land but on the seabed, the whole ghostly city charted where it lies. They could point upon their charts and say, here stood a church, and here another, and here ran a street the fishermen once walked. Here, most likely, was the place of St. Peter's, and here the tumbled stones of a great building that may once have echoed with prayer. It was slow and painstaking work, done in cold and difficult water, where the currents run strong and the sea gives up its secrets grudgingly. And yet, little by little, out of the murk and the dark, the old city came back into the light of knowing. And the newspapers, when they told of it, gave it a name that has stuck ever since. Britain's Atlantis, the great town beneath the waves, found at last, and known and honoured again. Think of that, gently, as you lie there in the warm dark. For 700 years the city slipped away into the sea, street by street and church by church, until there was almost nothing left above the water, and it seemed the whole of it was lost beyond recovering. And then, in our own day, clever and patient people went out over the water and listened, and found it, the streets still there, the churches still there, lying quiet on the seabed under the grey North Sea, exactly where the townsfolk had built them, and the fishermen had walked them, and the bells had rung over them, all those long centuries ago. The city was not gone, it was only hidden, and now it is mapped, and pictured and told of, and its story is kept in a little museum, and carried by the friary walls, and drawn upon the charts of the sea, and tonight held in you, who have walked all its streets in the imagination, and come to love it. For this is the truth we have been walking toward the whole long way, and I will say it to you now plainly, as you drift toward sleep. A place is not gone while it is remembered. The stones may fall, and the sea may close over them, and the map of the streets may lie 100 fathoms down in the cold and the dark, and still the place is not truly lost, so long as there is someone to keep it, and to tell it, and to say its name. Dunwich lives in the telling. It lives in the ruins of Greyfriars kept upon the cliff, and in the buttress of All Saints reset and safe in St. James's churchyard, and in the last gravestones that kept their patient watch, and in the little museum's lamplit rooms, and in the charts of the seabed where the drowned streets are drawn again in lines of sound. And it lives tonight, in you, for you have held it this whole long night, the great town and its herring fleets, and its many churches and its slow and gentle passing, and by holding it you have kept it, as surely as any museum or any map. What the water takes, memory keeps. That is the whole of it. That is the mending. There is no loss so complete that love and remembering cannot reach down into the dark and bring some of it home. And so we come to the bells. You remember the legend, the beloved old tale, told along this coast for hundreds of years, that on wild and stormy nights, when the wind is up and the sea is loud upon the shingle, you may still hear the bells of the drowned churches ringing far down beneath the waves. I told you, and I tell you again, that this is a legend and not a fact. No bell rings under that cold water, and the honest heart knows it. And yet how gently it holds the truth of everything we have said, that the lost city still has a voice, still speaks softly up out of the sea to those who will listen, still says, across all the centuries and all the fathoms, I am here, I am not forgotten, I am remembered still. Let that be the sound you carry down into sleep, not a storm, but the far, faint, tender ringing of bells beneath the water, ringing not in sorrow, but in a kind of peace. The drowned city singing itself quietly to rest, the way you are about to rest now. So let your breath go long and slow, one more time, and let the last of the day go with it. Let the shoulders come down, and the jaw loosen, and the eyes grow heavy and close. You may let them close now, whenever they wish, for there is nothing left to keep them open, and nothing waiting in the dark, and the whole tale is told and safe and warm. The great city was taken by the patient sea, slowly and without cruelty, over the better part of 700 years, and it is remembered, and mapped, and told, and kept, and tonight it is kept in you, and that is enough, and that is well. The friary keeps its watch upon the cliff, the bells ring soft beneath the waves, and you are held, and warm, and carried gently down toward sleep, as the whole coast is carried into the dark and the quiet, and all is peaceful, and all is long, long over, and all shall be well. Rest now, rest deep, and sleep well, and let the far bells ring you down into the kind dark. May the patient sea keep its distance, and the good earth hold you soft. Sleep sound, sleep long, sleep easy, and God give you good rest, tonight and every night. Good night. Good night. God give you good rest.